If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 41, Section Z1. So can I ask why you've brought me here? Behind the large hall where the NAN class had been held not too long ago, surrounded by trees, stood 4 individuals. One of them was Isaac, his back to the wall as Frank stood before him, his 2 lackeys standing to the side. Despite Isaac not knowing either of their names, he did recognize one of them as the boy throwing gang signs during the free-for-all, spitting fire. With a disgusted look, Frank spoke. "We're here to teach you some respect." Isaac raised an eyebrow. "Yet, how dare you waste Ms. Catlin's time like that?" The fire breather yelled. After a few seconds, Isaac chuckled inwardly in realization. "Ah, now I see what's happening. In Aurelius, one could say there were a few unofficial factions that separated the students. Usually, these factions were led by the instructor, and it seemed the 3 before Isaac were members of Catlin's faction, the worst faction of all. To put it simply, the faction were a group of radical supremacists, most following the condescending personality of their role model, Catlin. Daniel was also a member of this faction. Isaac, of course, only knew this information from Oliver. It seemed the 3 before Isaac had somehow learned of what transpired upon Isaac waking from his scenario. Who knows? Maybe Catlin even purposefully spread the news because she knew something like this would happen. It was clear they were trying to get on Catlin's good side by using Isaac as a stepping stone. "Hey, I didn't ask her to wait till I completed my scenario. If you ask me, Catlin." "What did you say?" Frank cut off Isaac. A menacing aura exploded from Frank as the 3 of them glared at Isaac. "How dare you informally refer to Ms. Catlin? Clearly, you've mistaken her goodwill for a sign of weakness." But to Frank's surprise, Isaac's demeanor hadn't changed one bit, despite how much he tried to intimidate him. Slightly taken aback, he quickly returned to his usual demeanor. "I'll teach you a lesson. Beast soul, we're a tiger." As he said this, Frank's right arm started to distort, growing in size and morphing, changing color to bright yellow with black spots, like a leopard. Name, Frank Tyson. Inherited character, Elfman Strauss. Verse, fairy tale. Breathing in, Frank swung his arm at full force, the sheer force behind the attack causing Isaac's messy hair to dance around. However, Frank's morphed arm simply passed through the air as he stumbled at the absence of resistance that should have been Isaac's face. "Oh, that's pretty interesting." Isaac stared at his index finger as Frank widened his eyes, scanning his arm with his eyes, only to find he couldn't move it. "Currently, my vital strike stands at level 1. I only have basic knowledge of the pressure points scattered on the body and their functions." What have you done to my arm?" Frank yelled, sweating as he gripped his arm which had turned back to normal. "Oh, interesting. Did he make his arm return to normal, or was it an effect of shutting down his Li-15 point?" Striking his index finger on the tip of Frank's shoulder, where the shoulder blade met the collarbone, Isaac was able to numb his arm, although temporarily. "The more important the pressure point, the more precise I need to be. Which is extremely difficult in the midst of battle. I got lucky the other day when striking Silver's GV-16, causing the muscles in his airway to contract, lessening the oxygen in his body significantly. Get him. Be careful, he's got some tricks up his sleeve." Frank yelled, his working arm transforming once again into beast form. Any sense of arrogance inside Frank had quickly left, just as fast as his control over his arm. Despite being faced against an F rank, as stage 1s, that fact was far less important than it would be in later stages. Fire style, Fireball Jutsu. Name, Rodney Alfston, rank, 61. Inherited character, Mizuku Inuzuka. Verse, Naruto. Suddenly, Rodney spat a giant ball of fire out of his mouth. The embers flew from the ball of fire as it zoomed toward Isaac. Boom! As it made contact, it exploded, shrouding the area in smoke and leaving a crater in the ground. But as the smoke cleared, the 3 thugs noticed the absence of the student they'd been attacking. "Where'd he go?" Before Rodney could finish his words, a powerful force struck him on the base of his skull as Isaac delivered an axe kick after leaping through the air. Rodney instantly fell unconscious, blood pouring down his face. "How? No human should be able to dodge that!" exclaimed Frank, and he was right. A regular human would have no chance of dodging such an attack. But what he didn't know, was that Isaac's physical stats were quite simply that of a superhuman. Ignoring the fact that his speed and stamina had been greatly amplified during his stay in the Dark Continent, upon receiving the Zaldic genes, his body had taken an additional leap in physicality. Let alone when he activated his Ren. Hu. The sound of someone taking in a deep breath entered Isaac's ear as he turned to see the third individual who now had a sword in his hand. In an instant, the boy disappeared from his position, reappearing before Isaac only to slash his sword outward. Fast. Name, Jeffrey Saleman, rank, 105. Inherited character, Hanuki Tanaka. Verse, Demon Slayer. Isaac ducked as the sword passed him. The two engaged in a back and forth. Isaac continued to dodge, the wish of the blade falling onto his ears as the blade passed him, cutting through the air. It wasn't long until Jeffrey once again slashed his blade horizontally, prompting Isaac to duck once more. Idiot! Maybe you should change your dodging pattern once in a while. Jeffrey yelled with a wide smile, changing the angle of his blade and pulling upwards, preparing to strike down. As he did, he failed to react in time as Isaac sprung off the floor, his head smashing into Jeffrey's chin. Jeffrey's brain shook inside his skull as his vision blurred and balance faltered, the last thought he had repeating in his mind like a broken record. He did it on purpose. With a thud, Jeffrey dropped to the ground, unconscious. What was that breathing thing he did to make himself faster? I might have to look into that. Isaac pressed his finger against his chin as he pondered. However, as he did, the hairs on his back stood up as a shiver ran down his spine. Leaping from his previous position, Isaac turned back to see a large hole in the floor where he once was, a large Frank standing over it with his arm morphed into what seemed to be a gorilla. Oh, nice. Hey, I'll admit defeat if you can morph your face into a gorilla. You'll probably look better than you do now. Isaac taunted. You little peasant. You've learnt Nen, haven't you? Frank spat, however, it seemed he couldn't contain himself, as he dashed to Isaac without waiting for a reply. However, before he could move any further, a large rock smashed into the middle of his face, shattering upon impact. Frank groaned in pain as he stumbled. Ignoring his bleeding nose and bruised face, Frank shot his eyes open, only to witness Isaac before him. Now stay perfectly still. Oh 12. Upon saying this, Isaac pressed his finger against Frank's stomach, under the belly button. In the next second, Frank fell to his knees as he began to vomit vigorously. Upon disrupting this pressure point, the target's stomach becomes unstable. What are you? Isaac grinned. I'm Batman. What? Are you telling me you people in Spawn don't know Batman? That's a crime if you ask me. Now, let the experiments continue. As the sun set, in an expansive campus in the middle of the forest, a boy could be seen walking toward a large dormitory building. Looking to the side, Isaac's eyes hung on the dormitory building not too far away from the one he was heading to, and vastly more luxurious to the eye. Its architecture was more sleek, it was bigger and it had a gate surrounding it with large men standing guard. What a waste of money! Isaac couldn't help but sigh. The dormitories were separated into 3 groups, his being the lowest, and the one he stared at being the highest. That dormitory was for high-ranking individuals, and other than the single-person rooms and private training facilities, Isaac couldn't think of any other benefits he didn't have in his dorm. Besides, his roommates were starting to grow on him. We even have a frickin' TV. As Isaac inwardly chuckled, he stared at his index finger, flexing it a little. That was useful. Isaac had learned a lot today. And honestly, he was afraid of his cover being blown. Firstly, if Frank and his lackeys knew what was good for their reputation, they would go telling the world about how they lost to a single F-ranker. Secondly, amongst the first years, or stage 1s in general, the gap in strength was slim, as they were just getting the hang of their abilities and inherited character. The gap in strength didn't come until the late first stage, or the early second stage, when they gained additional rewards upon completing their second scenario. Which brings us to the third reason. One of the many things the Academy used to determine someone's rank was potential. No matter the slim gap between an F-ranker like Isaac and a D-rank like Frank, the assumption was that the F-ranker would always fall behind. To put it simply, this changed little about Isaac's NPC status. Although, this didn't mean Isaac would start destroying his reputation as trash that he'd worked so hard for. The worst-case scenario would be Frank keeping an eye on him, or Catlin hearing about what happened today. Either way, Isaac. What the hell? Isaac had long entered his dormitory, walking to his floor and toward his door, only to find it was slightly open. But that wasn't what caught his attention. Instead, it was the blood smeared across the door handle. Walking cautiously toward the door, Isaac slowly pushed the door open, taking a peek inside, only to be left in a state of shock as he froze. "Zack, please." Oliver could be seen on the ground, tears streaming down his face as his glasses lay a few meters away from him. Atop him was Zack, no, more like a rabid animal. With a piece of wood inches away from shattering in Zack's mouth, Oliver holding the two ends and trying his best to defend himself, Isaac quickly snapped out of his trance as he sweated. "Zack!" Isaac yelled, drawing the attention of Oliver. Isaac, run!" Oliver yelled, his lower lip quivering. Despite his words, Isaac could tell from the boy's expression that he was begging for help. Isaac, preparing to leap, paused as he froze once again upon seeing Zack's face. More specifically his eye he hadn't seen before. Turning his head, Zack presented a single black eye with a blood-red pupil. Chapter 42, Section Z2. He's a ghoul. Isaac yelled inwardly, pausing in his steps as he stared at Zack's single blood-lusted black and red eye. However, he was able to regain his composure as he turned, quickly wiping the blood off the door handle and closing it shut. After all, he's faced a far more terrifying ghoul twice before this. Kicking off the ground, it wasn't long until Isaac appeared before Zack, tackling him as they both tumbled on the ground. Oliver, finally free, crawled to the wall, pressing his back against it, trying his best to control his rapid breathing. "Zack!" Isaac yelled, pressing his forearm against Zack's throat and pinning him to the ground. However, Isaac's words fell on deaf ears as Zack continued to growl like an animal, exposing his teeth and continuously jolting his head back and forth, trying to take a bite out of Isaac. "Snap out of it, man!" Before Isaac could finish, he failed to notice one of Zack's arms wiggle free. As Zack pulled back his hand, it wasn't long until he cracked it across the side of Isaac's face. Crash! "Crap, he's strong!" Isaac thought as he was sent skidding across the dorm, crashing through the small coffee table as it shattered into countless pieces. Meanwhile, outside the dorm, a girl with long black hair and hurried steps walked through the hallway. "Oh no, I'm late. Ava's waiting for me." Heather panicked as her fast-paced walking soon turned into jogging. Crash! However, she paused as she heard a faint crashing noise coming from one of the rooms to her right, although she didn't know which one. Where did that come from? Am I hearing things? She mumbled to herself, walking toward the doors and halting her breath to listen for any more sounds. Is something happening? Before she could finish, a pleasant beep could be heard coming from her wristwatch as her expression returned to that filled with anxiety. "Oh no, I need to hurry!" Heather exclaimed, reading the text she'd gotten and sprinting away right before she reached the door labeled 62. As this happened, Isaac rose to his feet as he wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Zack similarly leapt to his feet, his eyes wide and an eerie grin showing on his face. Isaac, be careful. He's a ghoul. I'll call a teacher." Before Oliver could make the call as his hands shook, Isaac stopped him. "No, don't. Not yet." Isaac yelled without taking his eyes off Zack. "Why? Think about it. If Zack was a ghoul this whole time, there's a reason he kept it hidden. It all makes sense now. Why he has never had an appetite for food, his weakness to blood and his rapid regeneration." The truth was that Isaac didn't have concrete proof of whether or not Zack was hiding the fact he was a ghoul all this time. For all he knew, Zack had an encounter with another ghoul a few hours ago that caused this. But Isaac doubted this. He was confident in his judgment. "I guess, but why does that matter? If we don't do something, he'll kill us," Oliver retorted, and as he did, Zack leapt from his position, shooting low toward Isaac like a bullet. "Well, he's a ghoul, right? And ghouls eat human flesh." Rather than dodging, Isaac met Zack face to face, head on. Raising his forearm, Isaac shoved it into Zack's mouth, causing the both of them to drop to the ground with Isaac on top. "Isaac!" Following Oliver's yell, the sound of flesh being torn could be heard as blood splattered across the wood floorboard. With a loud gulp, Zack's wild body started to calm down, soon coming to a stop as Isaac rolled off from on top of him, crawling away a few feet. Wincing in pain, Isaac gritted his teeth as he stared at his forearm, a large chunk of flesh missing from it. "I've been through worse pain, but this crap still hurts like hell." Despite this, Isaac could feel the pain subsiding as his wound healed at a visible rate. "I'm sorry." Sobbing could be heard in the quiet room as one could see tears streaming down Zock's face, his eye returning to normal. Isaac stayed quiet as he watched, while Oliver was still slightly traumatized. I thought I could control it. But when I saw the blood, it's like something took over my body. Rising to his feet, with a simple thought, a spherical glass filled with red liquid suddenly appeared in Isaac's hand from his storage bracelet. Drinking it in a few gulps, Isaac put away the bottle and walked toward Zack. Here. Extending his hand, Zack stared for a few seconds, before reaching out and grabbing Isaac's hand. Your arm. Zack noticed Isaac's healed arm as he sat up. My 10 gives me slight resistance to physical attacks. Well, that and paired with this potion from, I think they called the verse Full Metal Alchemist, Isaac lied. Although, he did buy a few potions just in case a situation like this ever arose, and the name of the verse came as a description for the item when buying it. Although, he'd preferred to use it at a more pressing time since they were quite expensive. So, whenever you have a craving and can't control yourself, come to me. Isaac smiled with a thumbs up. If this were normal circumstances, Isaac knew he wouldn't be so sympathetic. However, he couldn't help but relate to Zack. The feeling of your sanity feeling fragile, the thought of losing yourself being a constant worry, it was frightening. That was one thing the zombie disease had taught him. And if he were to ignore Zack when he himself was in the same predicament a few days ago, he'd be no better than Catlin. And that thought sickened him. Why are you? Zack was confused. This wasn't at all the reaction he was expecting. But, I think you owe us an explanation. Zack darted his eyes between Isaac and Oliver, who seemed to have calmed down. It wasn't long until Zack wiped the blood and tears off his face, nodding. After cleaning their dorm a little and Oliver swallowing a senzu bean, healing the wound on his forearm, they all sat on the floor as Zack began to speak. A few weeks ago, I was a normal teenager, going to school and chatting with friends. It wasn't until I started to have dreams and headaches about cannibals and men using peculiar weapons. Despite the dreams and headaches becoming more vivid and painful with time, I was able to endure it. Zack paused as he looked down to the ground. But then I entered my scenario, and my quest was to last 6 months as a ghoul. I awoke in a hospital with an eye patch. I didn't know where I was, or whose body I was even in. But I was somewhat able to make sense of my situation, noticing I was in the world that resembled my dreams. It was because of my dreams, that I knew the name of the person whose body I was in. Taking a deep breath, Zack continued. Ken Kaneki. Name, Zachary Bloom. Inherited character, Ken Kaneki, revolver. Verse, Tokyo Ghoul. What? You're a revolver? Oliver yelled in surprise. A revolver? Isaac knew what a revolver was, he just didn't think Zack would be one. As Zack nodded, he continued. I completed my scenario with an S-rank completion rate without anything major happening and I was forced to bring back a piece of Kaneki as a reward. Although, is more of a curse, if you ask me. I became a ghoul with Kaneki's Kagun. Any anxiety or worry Oliver was feeling had long disappeared as he let out a, wow. But, it's when I had awakened from my scenario that everything went to shit. Zachary continued, clear that he was struggling. I was in a hospital, the doctors thinking I fell into a mysterious coma. And thinking back, they weren't technically wrong. Zack let out a forced chuckle. If it wasn't bad enough that I had an uncontrollable craving when I left, a man was waiting for me. He said his name was Hal Lordick. Silver. Hal Lordick. Oliver muttered in surprise. He told me that he killed the Kaneki in his timeline and that seeing me was like a second chance at one of the most pleasurable moments in his life. He then told me to count down from 10. Isaac watched as he furrowed his eyebrows. When Zack said those words, a straight face of uncaring, no, a complete stoic expression. Isaac wasn't sure how to explain it. Like when soldiers from war come to terms with their PTSD, accepting it. Different from the soldiers who have panic attacks when they remember the past. Never mind, that's stupid. It doesn't even make sense. Isaac dismissed the thought. But before anything else could happen, a man with a goatee and suit saved me. He too was a ghoul. Kevin, that was how he appeared in the trunk of Silver's car. Isaac widened his eyes upon realizing. The man gave me a watch, telling me to run and that agents from Spawn would find me. Zack stayed quiet. That's it? Is that how you ended up in Spawn? Oliver asked. No, there's more. It was obvious the story wasn't finished. There were still unanswered questions. The man was right. I was found by two men who brought me to spawn. I told them everything about my scenario and my craving. Zack tightened his hand into a fist. And so, they admitted me into the academy, and sent me straight to Section Z. Silence enveloped the room as no one uttered a word. Section Z. Chapter 43, Section Z3. Section Z? Have you ever heard of that? Oliver asked, turning to Isaac, to which Isaac shook his head. Even Oliver doesn't know what it is. Section Z. It's a restricted area within the school. It's where the students who have the bad luck of inheriting cannibalists, monsters, or anything else that would be a danger to others are sent. It's also where I spent my first few weeks in spawn. A place like that exists. Is that where I would be sent if someone found out about my zombie disease? Isaac guessed that if others knew he wasn't exactly human, they'd treat him like a monster. It was no secret that humans shunned those who were different. Isaac knew that all too well. It was probably one of the reasons Spawn segregated themselves from the rest of the world. It was hell. Zock's low voice brought back Isaac from his trance. Blood-curdling screams all through the night, rooms with no windows and those teachers who tortured us, saying it was for our own benefit. I barely escaped after a sudden riot. Then why did you come back? I get that it isn't easy for just anyone to leave Spawn, especially someone on the run, but why did you come back to Aurelius? Oliver asked. I didn't have anywhere else to go. I knew that if I kept running, I'd eventually be caught. So I decided to hide in plain sight. But, the most important reason, is that I wanted to find a way to turn back into a human. Silence enveloped the room as Isaac and Oliver stared at Zack. I'm assuming that's a disguise. And your name really isn't Zachary Bloom. Isaac broke the silence, to which Zack gave a nervous chuckle. No, my real name is Logan. Zack gave a short reply. How were you able to get a new face? I mean, there are black market deals that can accomplish that, but you didn't have any money. And didn't anyone suspect you since you were an outsider who suddenly appeared in Spawn? Oliver bombarded Zack with a flurry of questions as Zack smiled, feeling slightly overwhelmed. How did you pass the tests Spawn conducts after someone completes their scenario? Isaac asked. In truth, there were many steps that Spawn took before and after an inheritor's scenario to ensure nothing went wrong. The truth was, cases like Isaac's and Zock's would be vastly more common if they didn't. People lying about their scenarios, rewards, and completion rates. Inheritors were forced to undergo tests that would differentiate the imposters from the others. This was usually when they determined who would be sent to Section Z. Isaac was fortunate he stumbled across Orion. It was probably because Orion was helping Isaac hide his secret that Jasmine didn't make Isaac take the tests. If he did, he'd have never made it this far, and his shallow lies would be futile. It's because of a teacher. Alexander Hall. Isaac widened his eyes in shock upon hearing the name. The blindman instructor? He asked, to which Zack nodded. He was one of the agents who found me in the real world and brought me to Spawn. He also helped me get a new identity and join Aurelius as a regular student. An instructor helped him. If he had an instructor on his side, he probably could have escaped Spawn altogether. But I guess that wouldn't solve his problem. They'd probably still be able to find him. I know I have no right to ask you both for this. Zack gave a deep bow as his voice broke a little. Please, I don't want to go back. Please keep my secret. I'm begging you. Tears streamed from Zock's eyes. Oliver wanted to help Zack up, but the simple truth was, he wasn't sure it was a good idea. After what happened today, Oliver couldn't help but feel wary. What if something like that happened again? They were able to survive today, but he couldn't say the same for the next time or the time after that. I'll be honest. My ears have been feeling quite poor lately. I haven't been hearing well. Can you repeat everything you just said, starting from when we were playfully wrestling a while ago? Both Zack and Oliver stared at Isaac, confused and speechless. What? Like I said, Zachary Bloom, my ears aren't very good. Isaac gave Zack a thumbs up and smile. It wasn't because of some noble reason or a code of silence Isaac had learned on the streets that made him want to keep this secret. But it was because there were no negatives to keeping this secret. If Isaac had to put himself in harm's way, he might rethink the decision. But even if Zack was caught, there would be no backlash to him or Oliver. It was a small price to pay, knowing that a powerful revolver now owed Isaac. Me too. Isaac and Zack turned their heads to Oliver as the boy spoke in an enthusiastic tone. Like my eyes, my ears aren't the best. Ghoul? Shaw. I don't even know what a ghoul is. Revolver? I think we have yet to cover that topic in class. Tokyo Ghoul? Is that even a real verse? Okay, now you're doing too much. Isaac put a stop to Oliver's nonsense as the lies became more and more absurd. I'm sorry. I'm not a very good liar. Oliver let out a nervous chuckle. Just keep the lies simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Oliver gave a nod. Thank you. Thank you so much. Zack continued to cry. At this point, he exhausted his tear ducts so much that the small amount of tears hovered over his lower eyelid, never rolling down his face. What are friends for? Oliver chuckled. Friends? What are you planning to do if you find a way to return back into a human? Oliver asked, drawing back Isaac's attention. I'll return to the real world. Back to my grandma. She's the only relative I have left. Zack answered with a smile. What about you, Isaac? What's your goal? Oliver turned his head. Me? It's pretty simple, I just want to live in peace. Oliver raised an eyebrow as Zack stared. What does that entail? You know, just doing whatever I want, whenever I want. Living my life with as much freedom as possible, with the strength for no one to tell me otherwise. Oliver raised an eyebrow as he tried to understand. It didn't make very much sense to him. I get it. Freedom. It's a great goal. Zack added. Yet. What about you, Oliver? After completing your scenarios and graduating. What, then? Oliver lowered his head with a difficult smile, pausing for a few seconds. I want to become an instructor in Aurelius. Isaac stayed quiet as he stared. It won't be easy. Is that a bad thing? Zack asked, noticing Oliver's peculiar behavior. Kind of. You see, my father, he's the chairman of the SA. Zack widened his eyes as Oliver finished. Isaac tried his best to look surprised, however, he already knew. He was quick to discover what all the commotion was about after their first class, and it was quite easy to make the discovery, seeing as how every single person in Spawn knew the name Clover. I don't like to tell people because they usually treat me differently when I do. The behavior, the atmosphere, and the look they gave Oliver, he always hated it. It was like a default mode everyone switched to. Fake words with other intentions hidden within it. People who acted kind, but only because of your name. And those who showed kind gestures, expecting some sort of payback in the future. Who wouldn't want the richest, most famous, and all-powerful prince of Spawn to owe them one? My dad wants me to join the SA when I grow older, but that's never been my goal. Silence enveloped the room as no one spoke a word. Isaac and Zack wanted to help, but they didn't know how. They didn't exactly have any experience with controlling fathers. Hell, we don't even have fathers. Isaac thought inwardly. It seems we've all got pretty tough goals, hey. Zack broke the silence. Suddenly, he extended his hand in the middle of the three. Let's make a promise. Although the world sees us as weaklings now, we'll all accomplish our goals. We have to. Isaac and Oliver stared at the hand for a few seconds, soon grinning. Fine, but not we might as well make this official. As Oliver said this, a vase and 3 cups appeared in his hands, seemingly appearing from thin air. But apparently, that wasn't what surprised Zack. Is that Aurora hops? Zack asked. Yes. I bought it but never had a chance to try it. What's Aurora hops? Isaac asked. It's alcohol. I see Mr. Hall drinking it all the time. Zack answered. I've never tried it, but it's usually how my father makes unofficial deal with his partners. They take a shot. Oliver poured the bright yellow liquid in the 3 shot glasses. Don't worry, Zack. You can drink this. Oliver clarified as Zack nodded. As each of them took one, Isaac couldn't help but appreciate the sweet aroma that wafted under his nostrils. Losers today, but winners tomorrow. Oliver yelled as the 3 of them lightly tapped glasses. As they gulped the liquid, Isaac noticed the sweet and slightly bitter taste on his tongue, and as he swallowed, a burning sensation followed. Ugh! Zack contorted his face in an unpleasant manner. Oliver coughed as he struggled with the burning sensation. That's disgusting. I can't believe I wasted my money on that. Oliver finally let out. I didn't think it was that bad. Isaac spoke, prompting the two to glance at him. Isaac thought it tasted like spicy black coffee. By no means did he enjoy it, but he wouldn't go so far as to call it disgusting. Without saying anything, Zack and Oliver chuckled upon seeing Isaac's nonchalant demeanor. After a few seconds, Isaac joined in. I'm going to take a quick shower. All the blood, sweat, and tears are starting to smell. Zack chuckled, getting a nod from the two boys. Make it quick, I wanna go next. No, I wanted to go next. Beat it, Four Eyes. I called dibs. Zack grinned as he entered the bathroom, locking the door behind him. As he did, the smile he had on his face instantly disappeared, replaced with a cold expression with dead eyes, vacant of any glimmer. Walking to the sink, he stared at himself in the mirror for a few seconds. Bending over, he turned the faucet as water gushed out of the tap. Splashing a handful of water on his face, Zack ran his wet fingers through his blonde hair, standing up straight as he did. Taking a second look at the mirror, he noticed the color in the area he'd wiped his hands as faded. The blonde had disappeared, as if it didn't belong on his scalp in the first place, revealing the color on his hair underneath. Chalk white hair peeked out from within the blonde as Zack stared at it for a few seconds, turning his head and stepping into the shower, removing his clothes as he did. Chapter 44, Targeting Ava Longfield 1. It's true, he really is the son of Xavier Clover. Heather could be seen sitting at a large table with several seats in an extravagant-looking restaurant. Beside her was Ava, as the rest of the Golden Six sat at the table too. With Cole trying his best to sweet-talk Ava, Kane seeming to be in an enjoyable conversation with Amara, Daniel scrolling through his watch and Lucy reading a book, it didn't seem like the group as a whole were very close. However, most of them knew that the individuals sitting on the table would be important figures in the future. It wasn't a bad idea to make early connections. As for Kane, he didn't have anyone he knew very well, and those sitting on the table had the most in common with him. Especially Amara, who seemed to be more chatty than usual. You've already started your training too? I've also started with Key. I didn't realize how much power and potential I was missing out on without it. Kane spoke with a wide smile. Yeah, but our instructor is kind of extreme. With just the first lesson, so much has happened. As she spoke, their conversation was put on a halt. Excuse me, didn't you hear me? Oliver Clover is the son of Xavier Clover. Heather repeated, this time garnering the attention of everyone at the table. Yeah, we already knew. Who else has the name Clover in school? Amara replied with a straight face and a hint of condescension in her tone. Although, this went unnoticed by Heather. But why isn't this front page news? Anything regarding Chairman Clover is a hot topic. And why is the Clover boy living in the lower dormitories? He should easily be able to send himself to the luxurious dormitories you guys are in with his connections. It was clear Heather was the gossip type of student. She'd know about anything that happened on campus. I mean, he seemed a little reluctant to share his name in class. He might not want people to know. Ava added, turning away from Colt, who cared little about the conversation. That might be the case. But he hangs out with those F-rankers. That wanderer boy in our class and the other boy with blonde hair who's kinda cute. Kane raised an eyebrow as if he'd realized something. I've been meaning to ask. What's a wanderer? Everyone turned to him with a dumbfounded expression as he asked. Are you kidding me? Well, I guess it makes sense since you're new to Spawn. Amara spoke, giving a quick explanation. Whoa, no character? Is it even possible? How do they complete their scenarios? Kane widened his eyes upon learning of the Wanderers. Luck, I guess. Additionally, they're sent to new verses for each scenario, slimming their survival chances even more. Amara continued, Kane seeming more and more entranced with every word. How rare is this? Surprisingly, not as rare as you think. Maybe 1 in 100,000. But since the survival chance of completing their first scenario is practically impossible, there hasn't been a single wanderer who has passed their first stage in about 30 years or so. 40 years. Everyone at the table turned their heads at the sudden flat and cold tone that spoke. It's 40 years since the last wanderer has completed their first scenario. Lucy, without taking her eyes off her book, spoke. Ah, yes, that's right. 40 years. Amara replied in a bitter tone. Whoa, 40 years? That's pretty cool. Kane spoke in a tone that resembled an impressed toddler. Yes, cool would be the right word, only if he wasn't a sorry F-ranker. Daniel gave his input as the attention turned to him. Potential, verse, character and completion rank. These are the most important factors considered when determining one's rank. To be classed as an F rank is almost as rare as Kane over here getting C rank in just his first year. There's only a few in the first year, hell, in all of Spawn. In other words, F rankers have no chance at succeeded in life. Their whole future is decided the moment that letter appears on their watch. Most of them on the table didn't always agree with Daniel, but they couldn't argue with facts. Well, that's a little unfair. I mean, from what Amara told us, all of her class has already learned Nen. Ava spoke in her usual cheerful tone. Please Ava, do you really believe that? I mean, do you even remember his name? Do any of you? Silence enveloped the table as no one uttered a word. Face it, it's the way of Spawn. The weak are forgotten. A triumphant grin appeared on Daniel's face as he continued to sip on the drink before him. However, despite his expression, under that all, a twisting feeling of rage bubbled inside Daniel. Wanderer this, wanderer that. What's wrong with these people? Are they so easily entertained by trash while they themselves sit at the top of the food chain? Pathetic. Daniel had long forgotten the name, looks and everything about the Wanderer before Heather brought it up. And he was positive the others had too. It should have been his name that traveled throughout Aurelius. Calm down. Daniel sighed and breathed a breath of fresh air. You're not a child. This is a means to attain power, I'm not building a fan club. Besides, people will soon forget. Daniel valued strength. In fact, it was his goal to soon pass both Lucy and Kane. He despised being third. However, he'd learnt from his mother's success. She was able to rise through the ranks of the SA purely backed by her power to make every eye in the room turn to her, soon earning herself a chair on the board of directors. Of course, she was strong too, but Daniel knew that just strength wasn't enough. With attention, fame, and charisma, one could rule the world. You're telling me an F ranker was able to defeat 3 students, 2 of which are amongst the top 100 of the first years? Is this some sort of joke? Catlin sat behind a desk in a fairly sized office as a large student with a buzz cut, sharp jawline, and hazel eyes stood before her. What was noticeable was the student's uniform. Contrary to the navy blue uniform the first years wear, his was crimson red. Why yes, Ms. Catlin. That seems to be the case. However, upon learning the fact that he's quite the skilled hand-to-hand combatant, as well as the fact that he'd just learnt Nen, it's believed he caught the boys by surprise. Slam. Before the student could finish his words, he was interrupted as Catlin slammed her palm onto the table, making him jump a little. He'd barely had his aura nodes opened an hour prior. How dare you speak in such a pathetic tone before me? Catlin yelled, soon throwing herself back into her chair, massaging her forehead as she did. Let's think of this logically. The damages on the students do indeed seem like they were caused by a human's hands, proving he fought with just that, his hands. And despite learning Nen an hour prior, 10 may have played a large role in his victory. Additionally, it's no secret that the gap between early first years isn't very big. With all this considered, it seems, at this moment, the boy seems to be a capable first-year fighter, one who shouldn't be looked down upon by his peers. Catlin leaned back in her chair as she stayed silent for a few seconds, scoffing a minute later. Despite all she was thinking, this didn't change how she saw Isaac. He's still an F rank. With his Nen, his potential will be capped at B rank, at most. And that's considering whether he passes his second scenario with just 10 months of training Nen. Clearing her thoughts, she turned back to the student before her. Pay our friendly neighborhood wanderer a visit, show him the difference between novice first-year inheritors, and trained elite second years. With all look of worry and anxiety leaving his face, replaced with determination and pride, the large student nodded. I will not disappoint you, Ms. Catlin. Name, Arnold Gaffer. Character, Alex Louis Armstrong. Verse, Full Metal Alchemist. Arnold turned, walking to the door as a grin appeared on his face. How lucky of me. I get assigned an easy task and I'll be in Ms. Catlin's good graces. Boom. As he thought this, he pressed his hand on the door and before pulling it, a loud boom was heard as the door was blown off its hinges, smashing into Arnold who was sent tumbling back a few steps. Oh, my apologies. I didn't think you were near the door. An apathetic voice resounded within the room as Catlin leapt off her seat, ignoring the groaning Arnold and staring at the door with a fierce gaze. At the door stood a tall man with drooping eyes, simple glasses, and a black shirt tucked into black suit pants. He'd look presentable if his body language didn't scream lazy. With a hunched back and his hands in his pocket, Orion walked into the room, straight toward Arnold. "My apologies, student. I didn't mean to hurt you." Helping Arnold up, the student tried his best to withhold the urge to attack the teacher. Taking his hand, Arnold rubbed his nose. However, unexpectedly, the hand he'd grabbed suddenly yanked him with immense strength. Leaping off the ground, stumbling as the window broke his momentum, he was prepared to turn back and yell in frustration. But before he could, he once again felt a heavy force push him from his buttocks, and this time, he stood before the window. Smash! "Oh no, how clumsy of me!" Orion spoke in a lethargic tone, lowering his leg and watching Arnold crash through the window. How disappointing, I quite liked that window." Watching her student get kicked out of the window, Catlin stared with a face of indifference. "Who do you think you are?" Catlin hissed, while Orion stayed silent, staring at her. "You think you can do whatever you want because the headmaster has taken a liking to you? You ought to leave the boy alone." Orion cut her off, however, rather than his usual lethargic tone, this time, he spoke in a low voice while a dark aura seeped from him. "What? The Wanderer? What's he to you?" Orion once again said nothing. "Wait, don't tell me you're sympathizing with the boy." "Him? A lousy F-ranker? That's hilarious," said Catlin with a condescending expression, staring at Orion as if she were looking down on him. Catlin giggled under her breath for a few seconds and soon, the room returned to his previous lull. It wasn't until Orion spoke that the silence was broken. "Jenna would be disgusted with you." The grin on Catlin's face instantly disappeared as her face became dark. Despite the silence in the room returning, this time it was different. This time, it felt like the calm before a storm. "What did you say to me?" Catlin roared as a flood of aura exploded from her, consuming everything in the area, shattering the windows as the air around them became suffocating. However, despite this, Orion showed no reaction as he stayed rooted in the same position. "I'll kill you." "Enough." In an instant, the aura retracted as the sudden heavy and commanding voice drawed the attention of both teachers. "Mr. Harrison," Catlin muttered, seeing the large and burly bald man with a scruffy ginger beard and a scar traced horizontally across his forehead. "Orion, I think it best if you leave. I hear there's quite the delectable cafe that's just opened up in the city." Harrison stared at Orion with a neutral expression. After a few seconds, Orion answered with a simple, "All right." Walking past Harrison, Orion quietly left the room. "You shouldn't let your emotions get the better of you, Catlin." Harrison walked toward Catlin as she gave a slight bow. "Yes sir." Before Harrison could say any more, he noticed something from the corner of his eye, making him raise an eyebrow. On Catlin's table, what remained of what was once the table, was an opened file with a student's profile. The Wanderer. Meanwhile, the rage inside Catlin was still burning as she gritted her teeth. "Orion, how dare he mention her?" Catlin opened her eyes as a hint of resolve glimmered inside it. "I'll kill him." In a dormitory, a boy with amber eyes sat opposite from his roommate with a comb-over and thick glasses. With empty cans beside them, one would assume they'd been speaking for a while as the sound the shower running rang from inside the bathroom. However, Isaac seemed to be in a trance as he stared blankly at the air, his face contorted in a confused manner. "Isaac, what's wrong?" However, he was given no answer. "What the hell is this?" Isaac thought, staring at the screen before him. A thread has been woven. Chapter 45, Targeting Ava Longfield 2. 15 minutes prior to the screen appearing before Isaac. "A guild? What do you want to know about that for?" Oliver raised an eyebrow to Isaac's peculiar request as they both faced each other while on the sofa, waiting for Zack to finish his shower. "I was just curious." Isaac shrugged. Isaac didn't know much about guilds, just the basic outline of it from the helmet. However, one thing he did know about it was that it was a place he could get stronger. Ever since fighting Silver, he'd realized he was inexperienced. Sure, he'd survived the Dark Continent and its monsters, but that was due to his wits, not his fighting capability. To this day, Isaac has had a collective amount of 3 fights. One of which he was saved by Netero, and the other was against Fito when he'd eaten the Sanguine. He wasn't even in the right stage of mind. And he didn't even count the scuffle with Alfie and the 3 goons. meaning the battle against Silver was the only battle he'd won, and barely at that. Looking back, from his lack of awareness that gave Silver the time to swallow the red pills, to his carelessness that made him overexert his healing and worsened his hunger, it was obvious to Isaac that he had to make some changes, quickly. Well, alright. I guess as an outsider, everything in Spawn may seem new and surprising to you. Isaac nodded his head, as if he were agreeing with him. Well, to start off with, guilds are a fairly new concept. They've only been around for a little more than a decade. So naturally, there aren't very many. However, the reason why they've grown in power and reputation, is because of their accomplishments throughout the years. Accomplishments? Isaac had questions, however, he didn't interrupt. Guilds recruit inheritors as guildsmen, allowing them to complete missions that range from simple F rank, like collecting herbs, all the way to S rank. Money, power, and acknowledgement are all guaranteed for those who become successful guildsmen. Therefore, countless inheritors have flocked to the guilds to grab a piece of the cake before it's too late. Interesting. Not only can I get stronger, I can also earn myself a little extra cash. The more Oliver spoke, the more Isaac agreed on this decision. So which would be the best guild to work at? Oliver slowly raised an eyebrow as he stared at Isaac, pausing for a few seconds. Why exactly do you want to know this information, Isaac? Oliver asked, to which Isaac wore an innocent smile. Like you said, I'm new to Spawn and I'd like to learn as much as possible. The both of them stayed quiet, staring at each other. Well, that would obviously be the Hearts Guild. It's ranked number 1. The same guild Lucy's family owns. Good. Before Isaac could complete his thoughts, Oliver glared at him intently as he continued. But also the most dangerous. Isaac furrowed his eyebrows. Dangerous? Yes. You see, the Hearts Guild specialize in the extermination of terrors. What? Terrors. The creature that appears when an inheritor dies in their scenario. The creature was usually a manifestation of the character of said inheritor. And since 1 in 10 inheritors died in their scenario, the chances increasing the further the scenario, this was a frequent problem for Spawn. After all, they had taken it upon themselves to exterminate terrors that formed in the outside world too. But this was reserved for highly ranked individuals. However, they were able to somewhat keep control of the situation, monitoring all those who entered their scenario like Orion did for Isaac. But this didn't mean there weren't terrors that went unnoticed, wreaking havoc. Ravenwood. This is the name of a small forest just on the edge of Spawn. It's famous for housing countless terrors. Since the terrors were growing in number faster than the SA could deal with them, they've made it a practice to regularly dump low-level terrors in Ravenwood, so as to reserve resources. That seems a little irresponsible. Isaac couldn't help but think creating a small army of bloodthirsty terrors would come back to bite them in the ass. And I'm assuming the Hearts Guild's missions are usually expeditions to Ravenwood? Isaac asked, to which Oliver gave a quick reply. Yes. I see. Isaac pondered as silence enveloped the two. There's also the arena. Oliver broke the silence. The what? The arena. It's an illegal underground fighting ring in Spawn. People go there to test their abilities or get stronger. Most do it for the chump change. Isaac stayed quiet as he glanced at Oliver. It was clear Oliver had figured something out. Although, Isaac didn't mind. It's not like he was trying too hard to hide it in the first place. Cool. Isaac said simply. The arena also allows you to change your face and identity, so you can keep your anonymity. Isaac had barely given a nod before Oliver continued. Additionally, the SA don't see it as much of a problem. In fact, they secretly use it to scout out promising individuals. Oliver paused as he widened his eyes and continued to speak in a defeated tone. I wasn't really supposed to tell you that. I didn't hear anything. Isaac waved off. But he had already made his choice. The arena sounded interesting, but he needed more. Besides, he was experienced in dangerous unknown territory filled with powerful creatures. This was going to be a breeze. He was going to Ravenwood. A thread has been woven. What? Isaac, what's wrong? Oliver asked upon seeing the amber-eyed boy staring into nothingness. What? Oh, nothing. Thanks for your help, I'm going to take a nap. Isaac stood, heading toward his room. Wait, what about the shower? You called dibs. It's fine, you can go before me. Saying this, Isaac shut the door to his room, leaving Oliver alone in the living room. A thread has been woven. Isaac had been sitting before his desk, on his chair for the last hour, pondering upon the screen that mysteriously appeared before him. It's gotta be. It can't be anything else. Isaac had a theory, and after ruling out all other possibilities, this was what he was left with. The calamity. Since completing his scenario, and seeing the message "A calamity haunts you," Isaac had yet to hear anything else about it. He'd almost forgotten about it. What does it mean? A thread. Countless questions ran through Isaac's head with no answer seeming the least bit plausible. Argh, this is hurting my head. Isaac stood, stretching a few times before walking back to his table. There's no point worrying over it. I'll just wait and see what happens next. For now, how do I deal with this? With today being Thursday, Isaac had been planning to set out for the guild first thing Saturday. And with his next NN class being Monday, Isaac had to worry about implanting his scarlet eyes and Ava Longfield. I'd prefer to get this done before I set out to Ravenwood. Leaning over his table, Isaac stared at a single arose on his table. This was why he needed Ava Longfield. He wanted her to mass-produce the arose for him. Since her family came from a pharmaceutical and medical background, as well as their close relationship with the cons who specialized in this field, he was hoping their talents could be of use to him. At first, he thought it to be impossible, since one needed the Brian to create an arose, but that was false. It wasn't until Fito told him her backstory, that he figured this out. She was able to cultivate the arose before the war, and before the Brian. Therefore, he didn't see why Spawn's best alchemists couldn't do the same, with vastly better technology. It won't be easy. After all, Ava wouldn't just believe what he had to say, let alone even meeting him in the first place. Isaac had worked hard to build his trash F-ranker persona, but he was starting to see the disadvantages it presented. How should I do this? I could coerce her. It's not hard, she's soft. Isaac quickly discarded this idea. No, that's stupid. I'd rather not make an enemy of the most powerful in Spawn. Isaac continued to think. It seems a mutual deal is the logical approach. Isaac nodded. After all, the arose was described as Fito to be a miracle herb. One that could cure 1,000 ailments. Anyone would become instantly intrigued after hearing that. Resolving his thoughts, Isaac returned the arose to his bracelet. Let's make it happen. One day later. It's okay, don't worry. I got it. In a cafe at sunset, the Golden Six and Heather sat at a large round table with leather seats, dirty dishes before them after they'd eaten dinner. Are you sure, Ava? Heather asked after Ava offered to pay the bill, while Daniel didn't need to hear any more and prepared to head for the exit. Yeah, we don't mind helping out. Kane added, to which the others nodded. He's right. What kind of man would I be if I made a lady pay for the meal? Colt spoke, to which most ignored him. It's okay, really. Go on ahead while I pay. Ava responded with a bright smile. Reluctantly, they agreed and Kane dragged Colt away while the others followed. I don't like to owe others. An apathetic voice came from Ava's side as a ding could be heard from Ava's watch. I've sent you my share. Lucy spoke as she followed the others out of the cafe while carrying her book. All right, thanks, I guess. Ava waved with a defeated expression. As they all left, silence enveloped the cafe. Other than Ava, only the workers were in the building since it was the end of the day. As Ava prepared to get up from her seat, she paused upon hearing a voice. Excuse me. Looking up, Ava was met with an amber-eyed boy, with messy and unkempt hair standing before her, wearing his school uniform despite it being late at night. Ava paused for a few seconds, staring at the boy. After a few seconds, her eyebrows raised in realization as the smile returned to her face. It's him. She thought. My name is Isaac. Do you mind if we talk for a moment? Chapter 46, Targeting Ava Longfield 3. My name is Isaac. May we speak for a few minutes? Isaac stood over Ava as they stared at each other, both fashioning an innocent and friendly smile. I'm sorry, I'd love to, but I'm in a hurry. My friends are waiting. Please, it'll just take 3 minutes at most. Cutting her off, Isaac took a seat opposite her. Seeing how adamant he was, with a difficult expression, Ava reluctantly accepted. Okay, how can I help you? Ava asked with a smile, to which Isaac stayed silent, instead summoning an item from his dimensional space. Pushing aside the countless dishes before them, Isaac placed a green berry-sized ball on the table. Ava was instantly able to notice the glow that emanated from the berry, as it pulsated with the rhythm of a heartbeat. It's beautiful. But, what exactly is it? Ava asked as she tilted her head. It's an arose. A miracle herb said to cure 1,000 ailments. Isaac confidently stated as he straightened his back and placed both hands before him. That's quite a bold statement. If something like that really existed, it'd change all of Spawn. Typically, Ava was skeptical. It's the truth. It's one of the rewards from my scenario. Upon saying this, the smile on Ava's face faltered for a second as she couldn't help but pause. Isn't he an F-ranker? She thought. In truth, telling her this was risky. Especially if she decided to reject Isaac's offer. But Isaac had already decided he wouldn't fail here today. He couldn't. Why are you telling me this? She asked, to which Isaac quickly responded. Because I want you to help me mass-produce the arose. Ava stared at Isaac, her smile never leaving her face. Please excuse my manners. This is a lot to take in. But why me? Something like this would be far more suitable for Amara or the cons to handle. Isaac nodded upon hearing this. He too thought the same. That isn't exactly wrong. But you see, there are aspects of the arose that are better suited for a doctor. This was both the truth and a lie. The truth was, the arose was more suited for the cons to oversee. However, the same couldn't be said for the sanguine. Despite this, Isaac would have preferred the cons, however, he needed Ava for something else. Additionally, the Longfields work closely with the cons. I was hoping to use their insight while also compensating them in some way. Although, these are future plans. If this were to turn into a company which produced the arose, Isaac would simply sell a small percentage of the shares to use the con in cultivating it. Ava stared at the arose for a few seconds, before a defeated expression showed on her face. I'm sorry. This all sounds extremely intriguing, but I must reject the offer. I don't know anything about this, arose, I just have your word to go off of. And even if I did, how am I supposed to explain to people where I've received such an item? Ava shook her head, letting out all the worries that had been bugging her. With Spawn's technology and the resources you have, it should be easy to run a few tests and realize I'm not all talk. And don't worry, I plan to deal with the latter problem. Isaac fired back as if he were prepared for the problems she presented to him. Although, in reality, he didn't know what tests would be done. He just knew Spawn technology could work wonders. I guess. Would you let me borrow the arose for a certain amount of time? Ava asked, to which Isaac nodded. Yes, although, we'd have to sign a contract. This was the only arose Isaac had, he was going to keep it safe at all costs. Ava pondered for a few seconds, staying silent as she stared at the arose. Despite all the reassurances Isaac had given her, it was clear she was unsatisfied. I'm sorry. Even if what you say is true, I'd rather stay focused on my studies. It all seems like a risk that may end up wasting all of our time, you included. Ava smiled as she stared at Isaac. Meanwhile, Isaac was inwardly left speechless. I've given her every reason to, at the very least, come to a conclusion herself and see the miracle the arose holds. An opportunity like this could be profitable for both her, her father, and the cons. Are you sure you don't want to reconsider? Isaac asked as Ava stood from her seat, ready to leave. Yes, I'm positive about my decision. I hope this doesn't taint our relationship as classmates, and please try to understand where I'm coming from. With a slight bow, Ava finished, preparing to leave. I'd have preferred my first attempt to work, but oh well. On to plan B. I'm sorry, Ava. But unfortunately, you don't have a choice. Ava paused in her steps as she slowly looked back. Walking toward her, Isaac summoned a few pieces of paper from his dimensional space, placing them on the table closest to Ava. As Ava took a glimpse of them, the smile on her face quickly disappeared as she widened her eyes. Why you? One day prior. Within Aurelius campus, on a grassy plain as the sun was minutes away from disappearing over the horizon, Isaac sat under a tree as he stared at the screen before he projected from his watch with a difficult expression. These are amazing. Scrolling through the market, Isaac had made a regular hobby to indulge in when bored. He could not help but admire the items for sale. Artifact, the Ripper's Gloves, A rank. Requirements, N/A. Description. A divine weapon, once used by the great Jack the Ripper, the Ripper's gloves can transform any object into a weapon with a single touch. Anything into a weapon. That could prove useful. How much? Looking at the price, Isaac couldn't help but pause for a second. Price, 56 millions. Balance, 91,428. Isaac quickly scrolled away with a defeated expression as his past thirst for money started to make more and more sense to him. With the mage's nucleus he sold giving him just over 720,000, and his dimensional space and few potions all costing a fortune, Isaac was left with this much. In reality, this was a fair amount of money to have on hand, but for the plans Isaac had, it wasn't enough. Who knew the gap in B artifacts and A rank had such a difference in price? But I guess the mage's nucleus being forged had a lot to do with it. The Ripper's gloves, unlike the mage's nucleus, were not forged by inheritors, meaning they came straight from a scenario, making them far more valuable. Artifact, forged caster, C and rank. Requirements, N/A. Description: a forged version of the caster pistol from the Verse Outlaw Star, this forged caster uses monobullets to shoot bullets of different effects. Price, 450,000. I have to pay for the bullets too. No thanks, besides, I'm not a gun type of guy. As Isaac continued to scroll, laughter and chatter came from afar as he dismissed the screen before him and watched a group of girls intently. Not too far away from him was Ava, Heather, and their usual clique. Oh, we should check out the new restaurant that opened up on campus. I hear they have some great beverages. Heather said, to which the group collectively nodded their heads. Sorry, I can't. I have some things to do. Ava rejected the offer as the group glanced toward her. Again? Mark my words, Ava Longfield, I will one day meet this mystery man you are so keen on hiding. Heather teased, watching Ava's demeanor fluster and her face turn red. Heather, I already told you I want to keep this relationship a secret. I already have a hard time with my private life being public. Ava retorted. Yeah, oh Ms. Golden Six. I'll call you later. Ava and the group laughed as Ava turned the opposite way to the group, waving them off. Relationship? Well, who cares? As long as I can get her alone for a while. Isaac stood, preparing to follow behind her. He'd long since activated Zetsu, allowing him to mask his presence. It felt slightly peculiar at first, seeing as not too long ago, he needed to hold his breath to accomplish this. But he quickly got used to it. He'd thought to feed his nen to the thing in his abdomen, but it only allowed for a result that made Isaac seem like a regular human who hadn't learnt nen. Meanwhile, Zetsu masked his presence altogether. Following Ava, he noticed her leaving campus, and entering the forest which encircled the school as he raised an eyebrow. It was rare for any student to traverse inside the forest, seeing as there was nothing there, and the distance between the city and Aurelius was too grueling to walk. Usually, one would teleport there. However, he didn't stop as he continued. Hiding behind trees, hiding amongst the leaves, and after sunset, Isaac was comfortably able to hide in the shadows like a boogeyman. Additionally, he constantly found ways to adapt so his steps were quieter and find more efficient ways to tag someone. If he weren't so focused, he'd count this as training. However, as Ava continued to walk, Isaac grew more and more impatient. Where is this girl going? We've been walking in a straight line for over an hour. They'd been walking for so long that they were starting to near the city. Isaac wanted her alone, however, upon seeing her suspicious activity, Isaac saw an opportunity. This might prove useful in the future. However, just as he thought this, Isaac caught a glimpse of a man in the far corner. A man Ava seemed to be walking straight toward. And it wasn't long until she'd reached him. Before she did, what seemed to be a cloak appeared in her hands and she quickly slipped it on. Doing this, she then reached the man in the distance. What are they? However, Isaac was cut off as an explosion of power exploded from the man before Ava. Although this bloodlust was directed at Ava, since Isaac wasn't too far behind her, he also somewhat suffered from it. The man exuded an aura that made Isaac want to rethink approaching him. The same feeling one would get after entering a beast's territory. Isaac froze as he continued to watch Ava stand firm, pulling something from under her cloak and showing the man. As she did this, the bloodlust retracted an instant as Isaac returned to normal. What the hell was that? It definitely wasn't Nen. Isaac was too far away to hear what they said, however, he could see them exchange something before Ava walked past him. I don't know what's happening, but I think this is as far as I go. This was the same feeling he'd gotten from when Netero fought the black skeleton. He was way out of his league. This is disgusting. Why must I, an esteemed noble, trot upon this filth like a common wild animal? Please sir, it's just a little further. A voice came from beside Isaac as he turned his head, only to notice 3 large men and a fairly short and smaller man, all wearing the cloaks that Ava was. Now that he saw it closer, it was clear the cloaks were not ordinary, as they shrouded the wearer's face in a thick veil shadow, as well as distorting their voice a little, making it seem as though they were speaking through an old radio. It seemed the smaller man was the one making all the ruckus. Interesting. Isaac stared with a menacing grin. When you told us we'd be working as an escort, you didn't say it'd be so bothersome. One of the large men spoke as he leaned closer to his partner. Stop with the whining. This gig is paying us fruitfully, so just deal with it for a little longer. Another large man responded. I don't care how much money I'm getting. I put up with this abuse from my wife every day at home, now I gotta take this crap at work too. The third large man turned to them, whispering in a tone. Just shut up and do your job. Wait, where did he go? As they looked back, they failed to locate the small man they'd been escorting. You idiots! You had one job yet you still complain like little girls. The large man, who seemed to be the leader, spoke, his previous lowered voice rising considerably. The 2 other large men panicked as they called out but to no avail. Sir! Sir, where have you gone? Enough with the yelling, I'm right here. The small man emerged from the shadows, behind a tree, wearing his cloak. Sir, please stay close to us. We thought we'd lost you. The leader spoke, his tone returning to a respectful one. Like I said, this is no place for a noble. I can't even navigate between all this plant life and darkness. The short man spoke in an annoyed tone as he continued to walk. Shaking his head and sighing, the leader nodded to the other 2 large men as they formed a triangle formation around the short man. How long? The short man asked. We're here, sir. The group of men exited the forest as they came across a man standing not too far away from them. With styled black hair, the man stared at the group with an intense gaze as they approached. That's for enough. The man spoke in an authoritative tone, to which the group complied. It was clear he was some sort of guard. Without saying anything, the leader pulled something out from under his cloak. It was a long piece and golden piece of paper that adorned black text across it. Tossing 4 of them toward the guard, the leader waited as the guard caught the piece of paper. In just a second, the guard stared at the paper, soon throwing all 4 into the air, to which they dissolved, never reaching the ground. The most common way people give up their power. The guard paused as he stared at the leader. Is by thinking they don't have any. The guard finished. With a satisfied nod, the guard gave a slight bow. I welcome you to the arena. Meanwhile, the short man in the middle of the 3 men couldn't help but pause. The arena. Isaac, in disguise, thought. Chapter 47, Targeting Ava Longfield 4. After quickly knocking out the short man, Isaac donned his cloak, and the rest was child's play for him. I didn't even have to morph my voice to sound like his since the cloak does that already. Other than imitating the short man's speech pattern and personality, Isaac had gotten through this quite easily. And since he was now somehow getting past the guard, Isaac couldn't help but grin inwardly. What's she doing in the arena? Isaac thought upon remembering his goal to follow Ava. Although his previous goal was to simply speak with her alone, this seemed more important. Besides, Isaac could simply catch up to her on her way back to Aurelius. As Isaac's group walked past the guard, Isaac darted his eyes around, failing to notice where exactly the arena was located. How much further will we have to? Before Isaac could finish speaking in his spoiled tone, in an instant, the scenery changed as the space distorted and sudden light entered Isaac's eyes. We're already here, sir. Squinting due to the sudden change in lighting, Isaac quickly flickered his eyes wider, soon being left speechless as he stared at the room they stood in. With a chandelier hanging from the ceiling, a large throne-like chair sat before a wide glass window. Looking to the side, Isaac noticed a banquet of delicacies laid across a long bar. Where is this? Isaac snapped in a strict tone. The VIP room, sir. Best seats in the house. The leader replied, to which Isaac understood. Grabbing a pastry and taking a seat on the throne, Isaac indulged as he peered out of the window. Despite food having no effect on him, he could still taste. And it was because of the taste that he knew the pastry he was eating was like nothing that had ever touched his tongue ever before. Quite deserving of its title VIP. As Isaac looked out of the window, he was quick to notice the surrounding area severely lacked any of the effort that was put into his room. With each seat being a foot higher than the previous, the stands cascaded upwards. On the stands, countless individuals wearing the same cloak as Isaac could be seen. Additionally, the outside lacked the bright golden light which blessed the VIP room. Although, if anything, the light only made it harder for Isaac to see what was happening on the platform. Straight ahead, not too far away from him, an extremely large platform with tunnels leading onto it from opposite ends adorned the middle of the arena. Just as Isaac was about to finish his pastry, a man in a neat suit walked to the middle of the platform. Simultaneously, a microphone descended from above and the timing matched when the man had reached the middle as he grabbed hold of the microphone. As he did, the lights to Isaac's room dimmed. That's better. Ladies and gentlemen. The man paused for dramatic purposes. Welcome to the arena. Hey 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 hey. The audience roared as claps and whistles filled the stadium. The fight you've all been waiting for. Place your bets, folks, because this will be one for the books. A battle remembered throughout the arena's history. Pausing once again, the man soon continued, yelling. Their battle will be legendary. The audience shared the man's enthusiasm as they continued to cheer, shaking the entire arena to its core with their passion. Where have I heard that before? Isaac wondered. On one corner, we have a recurring participant. With 7 wins and 2 losses, this fighter is known for leaving his opponents in stitches. Darting his hand toward one of the tunnels, the announcer yelled. Keep your wigs on, folks, cause this early second stage inheritor might just leave you petrified. Welcome, the Reaper's Hand. Coming out from the tunnel was a tall man with sharp and fierce eyes, as a glint of maniacal could be seen within it. Smiling widely with his bald head, the man licked his lips as he walked into the arena. The crowd roared as the man showed his face, walking to his designated area, looking straight ahead toward the opposite tunnel. Early second stage. He's the first one I've seen. Who is that? Isaac asked the leader. I'm not sure, sir. The fighters are given secret identities when fighting. His face is nothing but a mask. Interesting. Even the fighters get anonymity. Now, on the opposite side, we have the reigning rookie. With 9 wins and 0 losses, this fighter is known for their firm right hook and thirst for battle. One could see the crowd slowly getting more and more excited as the announcer continued. With her basic ability for healing, this fighter is almost impossible to put down, which makes her feral and unrelenting assaults all the more terrifying. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage the most viscous rookie the arena has seen in years, the Demon's Blessing. Just as the announcer said this, a figure emerged from the opposite tunnel as the ground shook from the excitement of the crowd. Emerging from the tunnel was a slender female figure with pink hair held up in a ponytail. With her hands wrapped in bandages, the female glared at Reaper with a mischievous grin. I've heard about you, Reaper. Everyone knows you're a trick pony. Prepare to lose to a stage 1 inheritor. The female spoke in a mocking tone. You think you're hot stuff because you've beaten fellow rookies? You're out of your league, princess. Reaper replied. Meanwhile, Isaac watched the female intently as he narrowed his eyes. Don't blink, folks. Cause you just might miss tonight's main attraction. Just as the announcer said this, he jogged off the stage, allowing the referee, who was dressed in a similar suit, to stand between the two fighters. Killing is forbidden. Additionally, continuing the battle when your opponent had yielded, or when I've declared the match had ended, will result in a permanent ban from the arena. The referee glanced at both fighters. Extending his arm, the referee paused before chopping the air. Fight. Without wasting a second and ignoring the loud audience, a book with a 3-leaf clover levitated from a small leather bag Reaper had been carrying. An amused expression presented itself on Isaac's face as he watched the book open, the pages flipping as a green hue emanated from it. In the next second, a long, sharp and curved blade manifested on both of Reaper's forearms, sharing color with the book. Name, Reaper. Inherited character, Jack the Ripper. Verse, Black Clover. What is that? Asked Isaac, to which the leader quickly responded. That is a grimoire, sir. Originating from the Black Clover verse. Although, I'm unsure about the type of magic he's using. The leader responded. Geez, are you done? I'd have knocked you out before you could even activate your magic, but where's the fun in that? The female yawned in a teasing tone. Severing magic, death scythe. The female's demeanor suddenly became serious, yet the grin never left her face as she arched her back, leaning backward as a press-sunrised air slice past her, inches away from decapitating her. The demon's blessing barely dodges the attack. Such reaction time shows her experience in battle. The announcer yells. As she did dodged, a gaping cut appeared on the tunnel behind her. Let's see how well you can talk when I cut your tongue out. Reaper licked the blade on his arm. The female pulled back, tightening her fist as she did and striking the ground below. Boom! A loud explosion was heard as the arena ground crumbled, the damage even reaching where Reaper was standing as he stumbled to catch his balance. However, as he did, he failed to notice the female who'd leapt in the air, clutching both hands together and getting ready to smash both fists into Reaper. So predictable! Muttered Reaper. Severing magic, rain of 1,000 cuts. In an instant, Reaper swung his arms at extreme speeds, blurring to the human eye as the female failed to find a way to escape. With a crazed smile, Reaper watched as the female positioned her arms in an X position, suffering the countless slices as Reaper refused to back down. This might be it, folks. Our famous rookie might be taking home her first loss. A river of blood accumulated as Reaper paused for a second. Severing magic, twin death scythe. Reaper dashed toward the female, slashing both his blades across her body, from the corner of her shoulder to her waist on both sides. The sheer power of the attack was enough to kick the dust into the air as the crowd watched with disbelief, staying quiet for the first time in the match. Bang! The female was sent shooting toward the ground, crashing into it as a bang was heard. The dust shrouded the area as Reaper dropped back down, watching with a prideful grin. The crowd watched with anticipation, as those who'd bet on the female's win bit their nails. However, as the dust settled, Reaper couldn't help but pause. A log. A simple log that looked to be cut from a tree lay where the female had landed. As Reaper stared, suddenly, he felt the hairs on his back stand as his heart skipped a beat. From the corner of his eyes, a pink-haired individual drew closer and closer to him, pulling back their arm. Told you. One-trick pony. Bang! A rocket of a punch landed on the side of Reaper's face as his brain was sent into a frenzy within his skull. His eyes widened as he was sent soaring through the air, tearing through the ground and soon coming to a stop. Ladies and gentlemen, Reaper has suffered a devastating blow. The announcer spoke with a weak voice as he too tried to make sense of the situation. The crowd, quiet, watched as it wasn't long until they erupted into a cheers and praise. Hearing this, the announcer also snapped out of his trance. There you have it, folks. The infamous substitution jutsu. We had suspicions on the verse she was from, but I think we needn't wonder any longer. I only used it to gauge his strength. Now I feel sorry for that wasted chakra. The female picked her ears as she spoke. I don't think Reaper will be able. What's this? He's still standing. The announcer yelled as one could see Reaper, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth, barely standing. The fight isn't over, I'll cut you in half. Reaper yelled in between breaths. Meanwhile, the female noticed him with a neutral expression. However, it wasn't long until her usual crazed grin and intense gaze returned. Good. We'll settle this in the next blow. Saying this, the female performed a sign with her hands, protruding her middle and index finger. Poof. As she did, a poof could be heard as smoke suddenly appeared, revealing another figure identical to her. She has just summoned a shadow clone, but for what purpose? The announcer asked. Shadow clone. The shadow clone, as the announcer called it, grabbed hold of the female's arm, turning its body and swinging, the female's feet soon leaving the ground due to the momentum. As the two of them swung with immense speed, the shadow clone let go, tossing the female as she shot out like a bullet as the surrounding debris were blown away by the wind. Idiot! You have nowhere to run. Reaper glared at the figure approaching him as he raised an arm. Meanwhile, one could see the female's hand become enshrouded in a blue aura. Is that chakra? Even from where Isaac was sitting, he could feel it. The power. Severing magic, death scythe. The blade approached the female as it looked to be an inevitable outcome. This is it, folks. I win. Reaper screamed, however, he paused upon noticing the female's wide and feral grin, completely ignoring his attacks. Seeing this, a feeling emerged from inside him. Perhaps it was fear. No, he knew that wasn't the right word to describe it. She's the predator, and I'm the prey. Meanwhile, Isaac grinned as he watched. She's even crazier than he is. The blade plunged into the female's abdomen as blood gushed out, however, she failed to back down. Die, punk! The demon's blessing! Boom! The female smashed her fist straight into the middle of Reaper's face as an explosion could be heard. The shockwaves were felt by the audience as their cloaks fluttered and they struggled to keep their eyes open. Reaper shot back, just as fast as the female came as he flew off the stage, crashing into the walls of the arena. As this happened, the female dropped to the ground as she pressed her hand, which was enveloped in a green hue, against her wound. However, this didn't take the grin off her face. Instead, she stood up tall as she raised her fist in the air. Simultaneously, the crowd roared in applause. Even those who'd lost their money couldn't help but cheer. The demon's blessing, the reigning champion in her division. Talk about dramatic. I still enjoyed it though. Meanwhile, in the VIP room, the large men watched in awe. What a fight! One whispered. Hey, you can forget everything I said, this gig is awesome. Didn't I say it'd be worth it? We get to watch a match and all we have to do is, wait a minute, where is he? The large men suddenly noticed the short man they'd been escorting had disappeared. Not again! The leader yelled. In a dark forest, an individual wearing a cloak could be seen walking past a man who seemed to be standing guard beside a tree. Next time, be more friendly when you see me. The individual wearing the cloak spoke to the man as they walked past. I was almost tempted to beat the crap out of you before. The guard said nothing as he gave a slight bow. The arena hopes to see you again. Ugh, boring. The individual clicked their teeth as they walked away, soon disappearing into the forest. As the individual walked, after a few minutes, they reached over their head, removing the cloak. How annoying, it's so hot under there. A female voice could be heard as the individual was revealed to have short white hair, wearing a blue school uniform. Meanwhile, in the darkness, amongst some leaves, amber eyes peered at the female as the individual grinned widely. Gotcha! Present day. Isaac dropped a few papers on the table, showing Ava removing a cloak from herself, as well as a pink-haired female fighting in an arena. Isaac stood before Ava as she stared at the pictures with wide eyes. I know. Before Isaac could finish, a suffocating aura erupted suddenly, causing Isaac to be caught by surprise. Despite this, he held his ground as his expression remained stoic. Hey! Ava spoke in a low tone, her face darkened. Raising her head, gone was the once innocent and joyful eyes, replaced with a fierce gaze as she spoke her next words. You tryna die, punk? Name, Ava Longfield. Inherited character, Tsunade. Verse, Naruto. Chapter 48, Hearts Guild 1. You tryna die, punk? Isaac stood in the middle of the cafe, facing Ava as she glared at him with a sharp gaze, grinding her teeth as she did. There she is. The real Ava Longfield. I'm glad you've decided to drop the fake persona, Demon's Blessing, Isaac commented as the aura around Ava intensified. Grabbing Isaac by the shirt, Ava tightly gripped his collar as she pulled him closer. I don't know who you think you are, but I'm feeling generous today. I'll choose not to ruin your life if you forget whatever you think you saw. It was clear Ava felt as though she was between a rock and a hard place because otherwise, Isaac knew she would have attacked him already. Or, you can do what I ask and I'll forget everything about the Demon's Blessing. Seeing her immense aura affect Isaac in no way, as well as being confused, Ava could see in Isaac's eyes that she wouldn't get her way easily. I already told you, what you're asking is. Ava spat, but before she could finish, Isaac interrupted. Let me finish. Isaac held his hand up. After a pause, Ava clicked her teeth as she retracted her pressure, releasing Isaac. I have 3 demands. If they're fulfilled, I'll keep your secret. Get to the point. Ava hissed. Firstly, I want you to take my arose. As Isaac said this, Ava intensified her glare as she snapped back. I already told you, I can't accept your random miracle herb. Indulging in such a risk will bring shame to both my family and me if it doesn't work. You've given me no reason to believe your words. That's not what I mean. Isaac's bracelet hummed as a sheet of paper appeared in his hand. Upon seeing it, Ava was instantly able to tell what it was. A mana contract? Ava asked, to which Isaac nodded. Read it. Mana contracts were quite the extreme form of coming to a conclusive agreement in Spawn, where both parties had no choice but to abide by the rules of the contract. Isaac had learned this from Oliver. It had cost him a total of 15,000, which he thought was absurd. But he had no choice. As for the punishment, it would vary. However, for this contract, Isaac had made the punishment. It says if you have any malice or ill intentions with giving me the arose, and the following demands, you will die. Ava looked up as she furrowed her eyebrows. Yes. Keep reading. Although, I'm not sure how it would kill me. Isaac added inwardly. I must take the arose for a total of 3 days to run tests, returning it to you after my time is up. If I fail to do so or return the arose in a worsened state, I will become your slave. Ava glared at Isaac as she slammed the paper on the table. Would you rather have the same punishment as me? Upon remembering Isaac's chance of death, Ava calmed down, returning to her seat. Additionally, if you choose you still don't want to work with me even after the 3 days of research, I will accept your wishes and never bother you again. Although Isaac thought it to be easier if he blackmailed Ava further with the information he had, he still didn't want to make a bad impression on the powerful Longfield family, and maybe even the Khans. He needed an ally, not an enemy. Besides, something tells me she'll be quite shocked upon figuring out the true capabilities of the arose. Even he was looking forward to what she found. Isaac has realized that other than the sanguine, he didn't know anything about the arose. Meanwhile, Ava stared at Isaac. Despite her mild demeanor, contrary to her previous furious eyes and grinding teeth, her mind was running wild with countless thoughts. He came prepared. Ava wanted to retort, but the truth was, she had no choice, like the boy before her had long since stated. If I'm being honest, it doesn't sound like a bad deal either. Other than the peculiar part where it was stated both parties would not harm each other, nor steal from each other when vulnerable, with the choice to reject this offer after she could research for herself, Ava could tell this offer was favorable to both sides, her especially. Fine. Biting her thumb and drawing blood, Ava ran her bloodied print on the bottom of the piece of plain-looking parchment. Excellent. Isaac smiled, as he did the same. As both blood prints touched the paper, a small glow emanated from it, and it soon returned to normal. This was how one activated the contract. With blood. However, the party must also give verbal consent. Now that we've signed it, follow me. Isaac stood as he walked toward the cafe door, dropping his formal language as his plan was mostly complete. Why? We can't fulfill my next demands here. We need to be somewhere secluded. Saying this, Ava paused, soon getting up to follow Isaac as they both left the cafe. On campus, 5 individuals stood under the moon as they talked while some even laughed. What, am I not allowed to comment on your beautiful silky black hair that reflects the shine of the moon off of it? Colt spoke, standing before Heather who seemed to be unamused. Tisk, you're such a scumbag. Just 15 minutes ago you were trying the same nonsense with my best friend. Have some shame. Heather snapped at him. Kane laughed as he watched, while Amara rolled her eyes and Daniel simply ignored them. Speaking of Ava, how much longer is she going to take paying the bill? Does it usually take this long in Spawn? Kane asked, to which Amara shook her head. No, she's been gone for far too long. We should go back and... Before Amara could finish, she was cut off as a pleasant bing could be heard. I was feeling tired so I headed to my dorm for an early night. What is she talking about? Heather read the text she'd received, scratching her head. Oh, what a bummer. I guess we should call it a night. Colt commented in a disheartened tone. But that's so strange of Ava. She's never tired. And if she was, she'd meet us instead of suddenly leaving for her dorm. That's not like her. Amara shrugged as she prepared to leave. Who knows? Maybe she's just having an off day. Happens to us all. Despite this, Heather still seemed unsatisfied. I hope she's okay. In the forest surrounding the school, as the moonlight peeked through the small gaps in the leaves above, Isaac walked past trees and through bushes as Ava followed. How much further? Ava asked as she started to grow impatient. Right here should be good enough, Isaac answered, halting his steps without looking back. Why have you brought me here? Pausing for a second, Isaac turned around, revealing what he held in both hands. Isaac seemed to be holding a glass cylinder with some sort of liquid floating inside. However, that wasn't what piqued Ava's interest. Instead, it was the 2 eyeballs floating within the liquid. Both of them were adorned with bright crimson pupils that dazzled, seeming as though a whole world was trapped inside. This is the Scarlet Eyes. Ava yelped, breaking character as her jaw dropped and her eyes were left wide open. How? She thought. She didn't know what to be surprised about. The fact a national treasure was being nonchalantly waved in her face as if it were nothing, or the fact it was an F-ranker who held it. You know them? Isaac asked. Of course I do. There isn't an inheritor in Spawn who hasn't heard of such a famous national treasure. But how do you? In that moment, Isaac could visibly see Ava realizing she'd lost her cool, regaining her composure. Is he really an F-rank? Well, I was going to say this is my second demand. I want you to replace my eyes with these. What? You want to use the scarlet eyes? This time, Ava was able to keep her cool as she asked with a raised eyebrow. What my intentions are is none of your concern. My demand is to have my eyes replaced. You're a medical ninja, aren't you? Ava grits her teeth as she suppresses the urge to lunge at Isaac. What I'm saying is, eyes aren't simply light bulbs you can screw on and off. Without the proper procedure, you'll suffer immense pain, not to mention the temporary loss of sight. Isaac walked toward Ava as she spoke, soon coming face to face. Shoving the glass cylinder into her hands, Ava couldn't help but be taken aback by Isaac's demeanor. He doesn't care. The pain, blindness, he doesn't give a damn. No words were spoken as Ava took the cylinder, only now realizing the section in the contract stating they could not steal or harm the other party when they were vulnerable. He knew. Crazy bastard. Staring into his eyes, Ava raised her thumb, index, and middle fingers, pressing the thumb on the bottom side of the eye and the other two on the top. You'll suffer the pain of your eyes literally being torn out, and you'll succumb to blindness till the scarlet eyes are implanted. Isaac took a deep breath as he exhaled, looking her straight in the eyes as he braced himself. Do it. Chapter 49, Heart's Guild 2. Pain. That's the word which Isaac would use to describe the next several minutes. Or maybe it was an hour. He didn't know. All he could focus on was Ava's fingers being plunged into his eye sockets as she yanked his eyeballs out, the ligament holding the eye in place snapping as she did. Then blindness in his left eye. Isaac had thought the Zabi would help heal the wound, which it did, but it did nothing to numb the excruciating pain he was feeling. As he tried his best to repress the urge to scream, he felt a faint touch on his right eyeball, his mind quickly realizing what was to come next. HGRRRR. Isaac was unable to keep quiet as a loud groan escaped from his lips, echoing through the quiet forest as his vision had completely disappeared. Isaac had somewhat wondered what it was like to be blind, and it was nothing like he thought. Other than the void of darkness he'd expected, instead he saw nothing. No darkness, no heightened senses, just the feeling of a part of Isaac disappearing with his vision. Of course, Isaac was too preoccupied to have such detailed thoughts. The pain soon somewhat subsided, due to his healing. However, it wasn't until Ava held her palm over Isaac's eye, shoving something in. Once again, Isaac repressed his pain by tightening his fists as it soon bled. Instantly, the emptiness he'd been feeling had been restored, as a warm feeling pressed on his eye socket, dulling the pain considerably. This was most likely Ava's healing. Doing the same to the remaining eye, Isaac felt something being wrapped around his skull, covering his eye with multiple layers. Bandages, most likely. And so, shortly after, Isaac was able to regain a shred of his sanity as he lay on the ground, facing the sky, breathing heavily and his chest moved up and down. It's done. Ava commented. Yes, I can tell. Isaac replied in between breaths. Congratulations. You have unlocked the perk tolerance. You're able to tolerate physical pain, poisons and mind attacks to a certain extent. Tolerance, my foot. I felt every last bit of that. Despite Isaac not being able to see, the system didn't count. He wasn't surprised upon seeing the screen amidst the nothingness either. After all, that was the least the status was capable of. Impressive. Any normal person would have passed out due to the pain. You only managed to limit it to girlish screams. Isaac could hear Ava take a seat beside him as she tried to rejuvenate her lost chakra. Despite her words irking Isaac, he couldn't help but agree with her after pondering for a few seconds. It was true. Isaac from a few months ago would surely have passed out due to the pain, maybe even suffered a form of PTSD. Meanwhile, Ava stared at Isaac as he lay quietly on the ground, his eyes wrapped in bandages. Despite her mocking words, the truth was, she was dumbfounded. She didn't think it possible for any person to willingly withstand such pain, and definitely not someone like him. F rank, really? A sudden wave of emotions washed over Ava as she couldn't help but reveal a wide grin. Excitement, pressure, and perhaps a slight hint of fear. She couldn't help but think, who would win? Now that he had the scarlet eyes, she knew his strength was nothing to scoff at. Your sight will start to return in a few hours, at least. Isaac stayed quiet. My last demand, is that you never speak about anything that happened between us tonight, to anyone. Isaac spoke his last demand. I keep your secret, you keep mine. Rather than addressing his last demand, Ava changed the subject. Why are you hiding yourself? You aren't an F-ranker, are you? If it were anyone else, they would never jump to the conclusion that Isaac was hiding his strength. They'd assume he'd stolen the Scarlet Eyes way before they believed he was secretly overpowered. But for Ava, she could tell. Why? Because she was doing the exact same thing. I could ask you the same. Ava paused, soon clicking her teeth. Whatever. Isaac already knew enough about her. Ava would take a knife to her gut before giving him any more leverage over her. And what of my demand? After a slight pause, it's as if Isaac could feel the atmosphere change, as Ava spoke, however, sounding like a different person. That's great. I'm so glad we could come to an understanding. Ava cheered in a high and innocent voice. Now, if you don't mind, I'll head back to my dorm. I hope you reach yours safely. With a slight bow, Ava walked out from within the forest, a slight hop in her step as if she were a carefree bunny. Or so, at least Isaac thought she bowed and walked like a bunny. He was blind, after all. All he had to base his assumption off was his hearing. And so, as soon as he could tell Ava was far enough away, he got up off the ground, sitting straight and tearing the bandages off his eyes. Isaac blinked a few times to adjust to his new vision. Unlike previously, where the space around Isaac's eyes were bruised and bloodied, now he showed no sign of his eyes being replaced, looking completely normal. I can still feel the pain lingering, but other than that, I feel completely normal. Looking to the side, Isaac found a sack. Without needing to open it, he could tell from the structure, they were his regular eyes. With a thought, his bracelet hummed as a mirror had appeared in his hand. He'd bought it just for this occasion. Looking into the mirror, he found his new eyes looked exactly the same as his old ones. Amber pupils. This can't be a coincidence. What are the chances my new eyes are the same color as my old ones? How many people have amber eyes? Isaac pondered. Perhaps it has something to do with it being a reward from my scenario. One of the perks of it is they are identical to my old, other than the scarlet factor, that is. As Isaac put away his mirror, a thought crossed his mind. How do I activate it? Status. Name, Isaac. Status, intense hungry. Stage, 1. Inherited character, Wanderer. Race, human. PS, Nen, proficiency level, 3. Hatsu, N/A. Perks. Immortality, LVL max. Zaldic genes, LVL max. You possess an innate talent and potential for the art of assassination, hunting, and covert operations. This genetic gift allows you to learn and develop your skills at a rapid rate. Hand-to-hand combat, LVL 2. You are a skilled hand-to-hand fighter, able to use your body as a weapon. Vital strike, LVL 1. You now have the knowledge and skill to precisely target and shut down your opponent's pressure point. Tolerance, LVL 1. You're able to tolerate physical pain, poisons and mind attacks to a certain extent. National treasure. Scarlet eyes, mastery level, beginner. One of the 7 most beautiful colors in the world, the scarlet eyes of the Kurta hold immense power and potential. Eyes will change to scarlet only when emotions are intense. Arts. N/A. Curse. Zabi disease. Haunted by calamity. Only when emotions are high. I guess I need to increase my mastery to break through the drawbacks. Additionally, looking through his status, he noticed his intense hunger. And upon reading it, he did indeed feel a churning and twisting feeling in his abdomen. Worse than usual. As if he hadn't eaten in days. With a hum, he summoned a few familiar pills from his dimensional space, tossing them into his mouth and swallowing instantly. As he did, he could feel an energy wash over him, traveling to the thing in his abdomen as his hunger lessened quite a bit. Although, he was still hungry. Whoa, these Vita Flow pills are great. Vita Flow, otherwise known as pills which contained a portion of any power system. And upon swallowing it, rejuvenated their PS. They were one of the two items he'd stolen from Silver's sack, the other being the mage's nucleus. Although, most of them were imbued with something called RC cells. I guess they're beneficial for ghouls. The pills Isaac had just eaten were imbued with nin, showing a clear airy substance inside, contrary to the RC cells blood red and the chakras blue. He only had a few, and learning that each costs around 5,000, Isaac would only use it when absolutely necessary. After all, Isaac wasn't rich. Well, not yet at least. With the deal I've made with Ava, the cash should be rolling in pretty soon. Whoa, is this how it feels to do an honest man's work? Not bad. Isaac nodded in satisfaction, looking at the time. I better get to sleep. I have an early day ahead of me tomorrow. He didn't need it, but he'd feel better if he did. With this thought, Isaac quickly left the forest and paced toward his dormitory. Early in the morning, as the birds sang and morning breeze traveled down the shirts of countless individuals, a long line of students could be seen in the middle of Aurelius, the most shocking sight being the large yellow portal in the middle of a small shrine. Artifact, Forged Warp Gate, C rank. Description, a simple portal that connects to another of its kind, no matter the distance. Requirements, N/A. No Senkaimon. Isaac was amongst the students forming the line. Usually, on weekends, it was common to see the students going to the city, or even visiting home. But for Isaac, he had other plans. 2 days. I have 2 days to get as strong as possible. The students before Isaac could be seen entering the portal one by one, and soon, Isaac stood before the man responsible for keeping check of all individuals coming in and out of Aurelius. Your name, and the purpose for leaving Aurelius? The large and rather unkind-looking man asked, without sparing Isaac a look. Isaac. I want to familiarize myself with Spawn. Isaac found this excuse to be sufficient. He was an outsider, after all. Besides, he wasn't lying. He wanted to familiarize himself with Spawn. More specifically, the Hearts Guild and Ravenwood. But he was interested in the city too. The man clicked his teeth as he turned his head, glaring at Isaac. Full name. Just Isaac. Are you stupid or something? Oh, you're right here. To the large man's surprise, he found the boy's face and single name without having to search for the full name. Ugh, whatever. You're obligated to be back by noon. If not, you must contact the academy, explaining why you've spent the night away. But under all circumstances, you must arrive back before Monday. If not, you will be penalized. Go. The man explained the rules, to which Isaac nodded. What a weirdo. Who doesn't have a full name? The man mumbled under his breath. Isaac stood before the portal as he could feel the energy exuding off of it. Without him knowing, he smirked. Perhaps it was the excitement of seeing the city for the first time, or maybe for the experience he'd gained in Ravenwood. But one thing was sure to Isaac. 2 days. I will get stronger. Thinking this, he finally stepped through the portal. In a dark room, a man with a scar traced upon his forehead, and a large ginger beard sat before what seemed to be a laptop, resting his chin against his fist. Unknowingly to him, he grinned as he watched 3 individuals fail to even touch the single boy they'd been attacking, as the boy danced around them, taking them out one by one. Interesting. Harrison mumbled with a grin, watching a paused video showing a boy with bright amber eyes and messy black hair. Chapter 50, Ravenwood 1. Whoa. Isaac froze, mesmerized as he stood in the middle of Spawn, looking around with an amused expression. Contrary to the flying cars and gleaming spires Isaac had expected from this futuristic land, Spawn appeared relatively unassuming. Skyscrapers dotted the skyline with sleek and modern architecture, but not overbearingly so. Wide Trillion Boulevard and bustling street-level shops and restaurants gave the city a lively, pedestrian-friendly feel. However, Isaac had done his research before arriving. Beneath this fairly conventional exterior lay a web of advanced, subtly integrated technology that truly depicts Spawn's capabilities. Transportation was a prime example. While the streets were filled with standard-looking vehicles, their engines were powered by cutting-edge hydrogen fuel cell and electric systems. The sidewalks were embedded with conductive panels that wirelessly charge parked cars, and even e-bikes as people walked by. Similarly, the buildings themselves utilize a range of innovations. Self-healing composite materials, dynamic window tinting, and something about highly efficient climate control systems that Isaac didn't understand. Yet these features are discreetly integrated, without overt displays of futurism. I guess they wanted the place to look as much like home as possible. Despite most of the people in Spawn never seeing the outside world. It was common for inheritance to run in families, that's why there were some families filled with inheritors that were as old as Spawn itself. There were also the far rarer, but still not outlandish, outsiders like Isaac, Cain, and Zack. These individuals were quickly found and admitted into Spawn. I can't begin to think of the disasters that would befall the real world if inheritors were on the loose. It'd be anarchy. Isaac chuckled inwardly while thinking of this. Excuse me, can you please stop standing before the portal? People are exiting from it and will bump into you. One of the people surveying the portal spoke to Isaac. Oh, sorry. Isaac apologized. Walking away from the portal, and soon finding himself on the bustling streets, he walked, turning his head as if he were looking for something. I have a map of Spawn, so it shouldn't be too hard to find the Hearts Guild. But before that... As Isaac thought this, a desolate alleyway could be seen not too far away from him. Perfect. His eyes sparkled as he hurried his steps, soon entering the alley and leaving the crowded sidewalk. Walking for a few seconds, he squatted. Simultaneously, his bracelet hummed as a few items appeared before him. I can't enter the guild without some sort of disguise. After all, I have no interest in hiding my strength whilst there. Isaac thought as he started to change out from his clothes. In a loud and expansive hall, countless individuals could be seen. Some eating, some standing before a large board with pieces of paper and some just talking. It seemed the large hall was separated into a few parts, the most prominent being the bar, the board everyone seemed so interested in, and a reception area where a female with a form-fitting black suit sat, attending to people's needs. Of course, this was the first floor of the building, as it was a tower that watched the ground from hundreds of feet up. The ground that seemed to be made of a sleek marble white floorboard, the lights embedded into the ceiling and the otherwise impressive-looking furniture, the area looked to be a professional one. This was the Hearts Guild. Countless individuals went in and out of this building, and it was rare to see the hall empty, even during night. As the chatter of all the guildsmen filled the hall, the automatic doors leading outside suddenly slid open. This didn't seem to bother anyone, since they'd adapted to the noise of the door sliding against the floor. No, instead what caught their attention was the peculiarly dressed individual that walked into the hall. His unkempt and messy black hair was the most normal thing about him, as he wore a long black robe, covering his body, thin boots that perfectly outlined the shape of his foot and a white mask with a thunderbolt adorned across its eye, as well as a simple straight black line to act as the mouth. The white in the individual's mask made his black and void-like eyes become all the more prominent. The individual walked through the hall, catching the stares of most individuals, the only noise that could be heard being his feet brisking against the ground. What the hell are they all staring at me for? I've already had enough from every pedestrian outside. I'd think the guildsmen would have better experience seeing this stuff. This peculiarly dressed individual was Isaac. The things he wore didn't cost him much. The most was the mask. And that was only because it was a low-level artifact that made it so your eye color was a deep black. This was useful for him since his rare ember eyes and even scarlet eyes might blow his cover. Just as Isaac was thinking this, the attention on him seemed to significantly lessen as soon enough, everyone went back to what they were doing. As this happened, Isaac let out a relieved sigh. Despite Isaac making the decision he wasn't going to carry on his NPC persona as a guildsman, he still cared little for the attention. If anything, it was a bother. People constantly watching everything you did sounded exhausting. But thankfully, it didn't last long. Even so, I should find a way to become invisible. Despite using Zetsu, it helped little when you stood right in the line of sight. People could still hear, see, and hell, he wouldn't be surprised if there was someone out there who could smell him from afar. What is this, some kind of joke? I'm supposed to be an assassin. Isaac thought. He couldn't help but think Zig would be disappointed in him. He'd practically been wasting his gifted Zaldic genes all this time. Well, might as well start now. Isaac could remember the first time he'd met Zig. It's as if the old man appeared from nowhere. No rustling of vegetation, no sound as he stepped on the dirt and not even a breath. Isaac remembered looking in the direction Zig stood while trying to find a way to help Netero, yet wasn't able to notice Zig standing there, staring at him. And it wasn't Invisible 10, seeing as how Zig hadn't learned it. It was him. The way he moved, breathed, even his heartbeat seemed as though it were paused amidst it all. If I can master that, paired with Zetsu, I'll be like a ghost. Following that example, Isaac paused for a second as he focused on his feet to start things off. He experimented with different ways to place his foot on the ground, testing which could save the most energy and produce the least sound. Despite looking a little drunk as he walked, he kept focused, and before he knew it, he was standing before the receptionist. Noticing he'd been too immersed, the receptionist stared at him for a second, before showing a wholesome smile. "Hello, welcome to the Hearts Guild. I haven't seen your face, or your mask here before, so that must mean you're new. Can I please have your name?" The receptionist greeted, chuckling awkwardly for a second before regaining her composure. Her glasses, that were clearly too big for her face as they kept sliding off, and messy orange hair made her seem as if she were clumsy, but her kind voice and wholesome demeanor made one see past that. As for the question, Isaac had already decided what this persona's name would be. Zal. Short for Zaldik. He thought about giving himself a second name for once, however, he wasn't particularly fond of the name Zaldike. It makes me sound like an adult movie actor. Zal. Alright, and your PS? None. Proficiency level 3. Wonderful. If you don't mind showing me your Nen capabilities. If you prefer to have some privacy, we can. Ren. Just as the female proposed this, she felt a massive aura spike come from before her as she snapped her head back. Whoa, his Ren is pretty impressive. Yeah, not bad. The surrounding individuals gave a nod of satisfaction, soon turning back to what they were doing. Isaac's Ren was impressive, but nothing to gawk at. That's sufficient, thank you. The receptionist answered with a forced smile. Is there anything else I should know about you before assigning your rank, like Hatsu or any other abilities? The receptionist asked, to which Isaac nodded. I have a perk, hand-to-hand fighting at level 2, and I'm proficient in pressure point attacks. Revealing your perk to someone was a guaranteed way to get them to believe you. In guilds at least. Same way if you said you were a swordsman with a swordsman perk, or a spearman with a spearman perk. Of course, there was always a chance the person was lying, but the guild didn't care. There was a reason for this too. Nodding her head, the receptionist tapped some keys on the computer before handing Isaac a card. Congratulations, and welcome to the Hearts Guild. This is your temporary ID card. You'll become a full-fledged member once you can complete any mission of your same rank. Taking the card, Isaac noticed the large D+ rank inscribed onto it, with his name and photo too. When the hell did they take a picture of me? Thankfully, it was him with his mask on. This was how the guild verified someone's credentials. By somewhat testing them with this ploy. If one described themselves to be an S rank, but was really a B rank, they'd only end up regretting it since you needed to complete a mission of your rank before becoming a true member of the guild. As a temporary member, your pay was sufficiently lessened and the temporary card had an expiration date. In short, you were better off telling the truth. My name is Ms. Joyce and you can ask me anything you have trouble with, as well as accepting missions from that board right over there. Ms. Joyce smiled, pointing toward the board as Isaac gave a polite nod before leaving. Thank you. No problem. D and rank, hi? 1 sub-rank below Kane. Although the rank didn't truly depict his full strength, as there were many things he left out, meaning his true rank was higher. However, Kane was AC rank before he'd learned of Ki. He must be higher now. Standing before the board, Isaac looked around, scheming through the board for a D and rank mission, preferably in Ravenwood. Surprisingly, it wasn't hard to find. Hey, are you sure you want to go with that mission? People have been avoiding it for a reason. A female voice came from the side as Isaac looked, only to find a tall brunette with breastplate armor and some sort of sniper on her back. Why? Isaac asked, curious. Well, it's Ravenwood, silly. The guild allows you to venture there as long as you're at least D rank, but there's a sort of unwritten rule that states you should be at least C rank, and never by yourself. The female smiled while tilting her head, as if she was stating an obvious fact. And in truth, she was. Everyone, even non-guildsmen, knew of the dangers Ravenwood presented. But unfortunately, not Isaac. That's an unwritten rule? So it's not enforced? Isaac asked, to which the smile faded from the brunette's face in surprise. Well, you're correct, but it'd be wise to listen. I mean, where there's smoke, there's a fire, am I right? The female chuckled, regaining her composure. Good. Thank you for the advice. Bowing down, It's as if Isaac hadn't listened to a single word the female said, as she could only defeatedly watch as Isaac went to accept the quest from Ms. Joyce. Are you sure? Ms. Joyce asked, stuttering upon seeing the quest Isaac had taken. Yes. He answered simply. Okay. You have accepted the quest to kill and return with a single terror carcass. I wish you luck in your endeavor. Ms. Joyce's smile was no more as Isaac turned to leave. No way, he took that quest. I'm telling you, it's true. I saw it with my own 2 eyes. The brunette spoke with a shorter blonde as a few others eavesdropped. Watching Isaac leave the hall, she shook her head with a disheartened expression. Poor bastard. Chapter 51, Ravenwood 2. Ravenwood, hey. Isaac stood before an expansive and wide gate with multiple signs, warning people of the consequences and dangers of passing without permission. These weren't the first ones Isaac had seen, either. Countless signs littered the forest Isaac had walked through. It had taken him about an hour and a half to get here on foot, and although there were specialized vehicles owned by the guild to transport guildsmen to Ravenwood, Isaac wanted to work more on his silent technique he'd been cultivating. I think I've figured out the most efficient way to walk silently. But it still isn't enough. Experimenting with his footing and deducing which was the most efficient, this was only the first step in the technique Isaac was trying to master. For this technique, he needed to have every fiber in his body in control. Even the slight twitch of the muscle might be enough to give away his position. The faint creaking between his joints, his breathing and mindset. He had to be absolutely calm and controlled. Only this was when he could become invisible. But I'm still far from that. Let's focus on my mission first. Standing before the gate, and walking toward a small shed with an old man inside, Isaac caught the man's attention with a slight knock. Oh my, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. The old and bald man, dressed as if he were a janitor with a one-piece white suit, jumped from his chair as he greeted Isaac. Hello, I'd like to enter Ravenwood. Isaac spoke, giving his mission and card to the man. Taking a look at Isaac's card, he couldn't help but dart his eyes between it and Isaac. Is there a problem? No, of course not. It's just been a while since I've last seen AD and rank around here, that's all. The old man handed the card back with a chuckle. But AD and ranker by himself coming to Ravenwood? Well, if I've not yet gone senile, that's never happened before. The old man paused, staring at Isaac. He'd expected someone by themselves coming to Ravenwood would be at least an A ranker. Maybe I'll survive and it'll make everyone grow some balls. Upon hearing this, the old man gave a hearty chuckle. I hope you do, but like they say, ignorance is bliss. Nothing good will come out of people becoming too cocky. Pulling out a map from under his desk, the old man traced his finger upon it. This is a map of Ravenwood. As you can see, it is separated into 3 zones. Green, yellow, and red. As you can imagine, green is the safest, while red is not so safe. Guildsmen, and even the SA, rarely traverse into the red zone. The terrors there are far too powerful, and the resources that would be wasted, as well as the lives that would be lost wouldn't be worth it. Isaac nodded in understanding. He wasn't surprised by the poor choices of the SA, seeing as how Ravenwood existed for years without them doing anything about it. Your mission is to capture a terror carcass whilst in the green zone. Anything above that will be accepted, but it isn't worth it. The old man was right. Isaac had no interest in passing the green zone. He was bold, not suicidal. That's all. I wish you luck in your mission. The old man gave Isaac a look which he'd seen before. It was the same look Ms. Joyce had given him. But he didn't mind. Thank you. Isaac gave a slight bow, walking toward the surprisingly small door which supposedly led to the inside of Ravenwood. He was expecting a large gate, or something along those lines. No matter. Pulling the handle of the door, Isaac opened the door as he was met with the same forest he'd been walking in for the last hour and a half. Well, technically it's the same forest. I guess I have to go deeper to truly enter Ravenwood. As he thought this, Isaac wasted no time as he dashed toward the deep forest. Meanwhile, the old man stared at the departing masked figure with an emphatic look, the same you'd give upon seeing a grave. Shaking his head, he shut the door as the forest once again returned to its usual silence. This should be far enough. Isaac, who'd been sprinting for a few minutes, hid in a tree amongst leaves with his Zetsu activated. Although this was dangerous, as he was leaving himself defenseless since his Nen was suppressed, he had confidence in his healing. Putting his thumb and index finger together and forming a 0 shape, Isaac held it over his eye as he allowed a wisp of nin to pass through. This was the telescope technique Netero had taught him, and it had been a while since he'd used it. As he did, it didn't take long to notice something. However, upon seeing it, he couldn't help but stare for a second. In the distance was a tall humanoid figure, with muscles that looked as though they were sculpted to perfection. However, rather than a head, the figure possessed a large head of a dog. It's not the first time I've seen a half-human half-monster hybrid, Isaac thought, remembering the Brian. Most surprisingly, was the long sword the figure held. The sword, with a golden guard and curved blade, looked like nothing special in itself, but made Isaac wonder. Where did it find the sword and what can the sword do? Isaac's mind was open to every and all possibilities. There was nothing that was impossible here. And thinking this, he leapt from the tree he sat and disappeared into the forest below. The humanoid figure with the dog head and sword, stood beside a tree as it aimlessly wandered. Terror, Anubis. Inherited character, Anubis, stand. Verse, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. It wasn't long until a rustle could be heard in the bushes nearby. Anubis snapped his head back, only to notice a figure in a mask. Hello. Isaac enthusiastically waved. However, the greeting was not returned as the Anubis kicked off the ground, shooting toward Isaac. He isn't very fast. Ren. The Anubis raised its sword, slashing diagonally, to which Isaac swiftly dodged. However, Isaac was surprised to notice the blade of the sword curve as the Anubis turned the handle. With the blade now facing Isaac, the Anubis changed his trajectory as the blade traveled toward Isaac. It's skilled. Clang. However, the sword was promptly blocked as a loud clash between two metal rang out. Holding a dagger in his hand, Isaac blocked the attack as small sparks flew from the two metals colliding. Remembering Silver's fight, using his fingers to stab someone like a ghoul, who could wrap himself in an exoskeleton, was not ideal. Therefore, he opted for a dagger. Although the dagger was not an artifact, it still did a better job than Isaac's fingers. Pulling the sword back, the Anubis continued to swing as Isaac blocked and dodged, moving back further as he did. It's not strong either. I can do this. The clashes continued as the Anubis performed intricate and skilled swordsmanship techniques, swinging his sword with power, but keeping it accurate and controlled like a raging river. His attacks went on like an endless current. Meanwhile, Isaac moved further and further back, blocking the attacks without much difficulty. Since he was faster, and their strength was fairly relative, it wasn't hard. Click. As the Anubis swung once more, Isaac grinned under his mask as a click resounded amongst the clashes. Leaping back countless feet, Isaac hid behind a tree in a matter of seconds as the Anubis prepared to follow. However, the Anubis failed to notice the device below his feet loosen as he removed his weight off of it. Boom! An ear-piercing explosion could be heard as Isaac safely listened to it all from behind the tree. The Anubis was sent zooming through the air, crashing into a tree yet refused to release its sword. However, this didn't matter as Isaac appeared before the Anubis in a matter of seconds. Your body is human, right? Good enough for me. Isaac extended his index finger as he stabbed at a few precise locations on the Anubis body. It wasn't long until Isaac stepped back, letting the Anubis drop to the ground. As the Anubis' arm and hand was disabled, it failed to keep hold of its weapon as the sword dropped a few feet away from him. Who knew bombs were so useful? It didn't hurt him, but gave me enough time to use Vital Strike. Isaac's thoughts were cut short as he furrowed his eyebrows upon noticing the Anubis' head change, as well as its muscular body. The body as a whole shifted, shrinking, and soon, it had turned into what seemed to be a regular person. Cautiously turning the body over, Isaac noticed the normal human face with black hair and a regular physique. The sword. It can't be. As Isaac widened his eyes, the human laying on the ground flickered his eyes open as he looked around. Who are you? Where am I? The human panicked, his worry intensifying when he found he'd lost control of his body. Calm down, I'm with the Hearts Guild. Isaac brandished his ID as the man stared, his demeanor quickly changing from that of fear to relief. He didn't care that the ID presented a large D and rank upon it, or maybe he didn't notice. Isaac couldn't tell, but he couldn't blame the man. It looked as if he'd been through a lot. Thank you, thank you so much. The man sobbed as Isaac rose to his feet. Walking toward the sword, Isaac gave the man some time to calm down as he squatted before the weapon. The man proves it. He wasn't the terror, this sword is. Can it be counted as an artifact? If it can, it'd be an original, straight from a scenario, becoming incredibly valuable, even if it is cursed. The fact that a sword could be both an artifact and a terror fascinated Isaac. I'll keep it. It'd be stupid to hand it over. I'll look for another carcass to complete my mission. Putting his cloak between him and the sword so that there was no direct contact, Isaac went to touch the sword and send it to his dimensional space. No, don't. It won't work, it's cursed. The man yelled upon seeing Isaac reaching for the sword, but it was too late. As Isaac gripped the blade, it felt as though something had invaded his insides as it rushed in through his arm. Shit. He'd lost all control of his body as it felt like his sanity and consciousness was slipping, as if it were being sucked away from him. He could feel the entity from the sword passing through his arm, shooting toward his weakened brain. Isaac could feel it, he was seconds away from being taken over. However, he remembered something. He already had an entity inside him. Releasing his Nen, Isaac could feel his hunger worsening. The thing in his stomach was unleashed as it traveled through his body. As it did, it came across the only other foreign entity in Isaac's body at the time. Quickly. Isaac couldn't last much longer. However, it wasn't long until the thing focused onto the foreign entity coming into contact as the two clashed. In the next second, the thing completely swallowed the foreign entity, following the trail it left behind to Isaac's arm. Meanwhile, Isaac felt as though an explosion occurred inside him, but his sanity had somewhat returned. Immediately, he sent the sword into his dimensional space, commanding all his Nen to quell the thing inside him as he knelt on the ground. This all had happened in the span of a few seconds, but to Isaac, it was akin to a few hours. Zabi beats man dog. Isaac grinned. Additionally, he felt as though his hunger had sufficiently lessened from before. Whoa, that was close. Turning back with a chuckle, speaking to the paralyzed man, Isaac could only stare as what stood before him made him widen his eyes. Before him stood a figure with an imposing physique, surprisingly not that much taller than Isaac, and massive muscles that had grown to grotesque proportions, making it so his muscle fibers were visible. Additionally, sharp, bone-like protrusions emerged from his joints and limbs, giving him a truly monstrous appearance. And his head? A deformed, pulsating mass with multiple eyes and a gaping maw filled with rows of razor-sharp teeth. What? Isaac thought, taking a step back. Being face to face with a creature that exuded a suffocating aura, he couldn't help but gulp. However, it was then he noticed the black-haired man he'd saved in the monster's hand, crushed as blood seeped from every orifice. Isaac was given no time to think as the being before him raised the man, tossing it at breathtaking speeds toward Isaac. Damn it! Clap! Planting his feet and preparing to catch the man, a loud clap could be heard, as if two hands forcefully made contact. Simultaneously, in the blink of an eye, the dead man shooting toward Isaac had disappeared, replaced with the towering monster as it peered at Isaac with all its eyes. What the hell? The last thing Isaac could see was the monster's hand shrouded in a sort of blue energy. But not chakra. No, he'd seen that before. This was something else. The black outlines and thicker color proved it. Raising its arm, the monster turned its body skillfully, pummeling its bare fist into Isaac's gut as a loud bang was heard. Isaac's feet were lifted off the ground as his body coiled around the fist, spitting a river of blood as his eyes felt like they'd pop out of his skull. Terror, the Juggernaut. Inherited character, Todo Aoi. Verse, Jujutsu Kaisen. Chapter 52, A thread has been woven. 1. Isaac picked himself up from the ground, at the Juggernaut's feet as he struggled to catch his breath. A puddle of blood lay beneath him as the Juggernaut raised its fist once again. Boom! Rolling out of the way as a large crater was made where he previously was, Isaac pressed against his ribs as he stared at the monster before him. Shit 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 shit! Isaac cursed inwardly as his contempt for Ravenwood started to grow. But he knew. He knew he couldn't regret his decision now, after all, this was what he wanted. This is why he came here. For the strong and unpredictable. He wasn't going to run now. Nah, I'll win. It would take a few seconds for his body to heal, but he was given no moment for respite as the Juggernaut bent its legs, all of its eyes locked onto Isaac, soon shooting toward its prey like a rocket. Isaac forced himself through the agony, planting his feet as he watched the monster approach him. Despite its large size and Isaac's Ren being active, he could barely keep up with the Juggernaut as Isaac could tell he was a little slower. But his flexibility and small stature allowed him to slither past the first blow as it grazed his cheek, the mere air perpetuating off of it cutting his cheek. In response, he threw a jab of his own, planning to go blow for blow with the beast. However, he was deeply mistaken. The Juggernaut tilted its head slightly as Isaac's fist was met with air. What? Surprised by its agility, the tides of the battle were once again tipped in the Juggernaut's favor. This became all the more apparent as Isaac suffered the Juggernaut's shin crashing against his ribs, the side with which he used to jab. KHRM. Isaac soared through the air, crashing into plant life and tearing through the ground, soon coming to a stop as he smashed into a tree. It's intelligent. It waited till I made a premature attack. That jab created a blind spot and left me wide open. Perhaps it was because Isaac hadn't expected such hand-to-hand skills from the Terror, but he ultimately blamed it on his ignorance. Everything is possible. Assume he's always one step ahead. Its skin is tough too. I doubt my knife will pierce, let alone my vital strike reaching his points. Using the tree as support, Isaac was glad to see the Juggernaut hadn't chased him down after attacking, giving him some time to heal. However, his anxiety quickly returned as he witnessed the Juggernaut dig its fingers into a tall tree, tearing it from its roots. With a heave, it hurled the tree toward Isaac as the surrounding plant life didn't stand a chance, all crumbling away. Kicking off the ground, Isaac sprinted up the closest tree to him, leaping in the air and avoiding the tree that chaotically devastated where he once stood. Clap! A clap could be heard as the tree he'd run up suddenly disappeared, replaced by the Juggernaut as he loomed over Isaac. Bang! Isaac once again suffered the blow, shooting into the ground like a meteor. He lay in the dust cloud he'd created, hoping for a second to just rest. Even with the pain tolerance, Isaac felt as though he was being tortured, every blow dealing him serious damage. Snap, snap, snap. Constant snaps could be heard, as Isaac looked up to see the Juggernaut constantly snapping dry wood into smaller pieces. Slowly rising to his feet, a plan formulated in Isaac's mind as the two fighters stared at each other, unmoving. It wasn't long until the Juggernaut tossed countless smaller twigs toward Isaac. Clap! No, you don't. Isaac swung his head toward where he suspected the Juggernaut, but he was met with a falling twig. Suddenly, he shivered as he felt the heavy breath of the Juggernaut on his neck. Clap! Twisting his body back, he was once again met with nothing, only this time, he caught a glimpse of the Juggernaut. Clap! Isaac was once again left to think he might have been hit too hard on the head and started to hallucinate. Clap! Not there! Clap! He's gone! Clap! Nothing! Clap! At this moment, Isaac was merely a trapped mouse amongst a clouder of cats as his powerlessness became more and more apparent. Clap! The Juggernaut blinked around Isaac at near blinding speeds, and each time he did, he nudged the twigs he was closest to, keeping them in the air. Clap! Even if Isaac tried to leave its blinking radius, it would simply toss a few twigs, entrapping him once again. Clap! The Juggernaut even threw a few feints, making Isaac flinch a little but quickly disappearing once again, as if he were mocking the boy. Clap! However, Isaac noticed something. To keep this up, the Juggernaut could never let his twigs touch the ground. Whenever the twig is about to drop, he teleports to it, or a twig beside it. Knowing this, Isaac was quickly able to find the twig closest to the ground, and as he waited for the next clap, he dug his feet into the ground. And as he thought, clap! Isaac prepared to attack, but nothing happened. Looking back, the Juggernaut lowered its body as it drew closer and closer to Isaac. It clapped, but didn't teleport. It's as if all time slowed down as Isaac could do nothing but witness the Juggernaut pull back its fist. But there was something Isaac noticed. This attack was different. Where the previous attacks were shrouded in a blue aura with black lines, this time, the Juggernauts used no aura. The bare hand traveled to Isaac, inches away from making contact. Crackle! Bang! However, in the last second, no, less than a second, the Juggernaut activated its aura as the space distorted while red and black lighting shot out. Isaac had turned into a ball of black mass, traveling faster than a bullet as his trajectory and body flailed upon each plant life he crashed into. After a while, Isaac lay with his back against a tree, his head lowered and darkened, unmoving as if he were a corpse. Mangled limbs, rivers of blood and an insatiable hunger that felt as though his stomach was being torn apart. And most notably, a gaping hole in his abdomen. His clothes were torn, revealing skin while his mask had fallen off his face. His eyes, dull and whitened. His breathing, weak and faint, Isaac looked no better than a man about to witness his last heartbeats. However, not Isaac. The benefit to his hunger was the frightening healing. So much so that as the seconds passed, his consciousness slowly came back, and it seemed his healing was concentrated on the hole in his abdomen. With his sanity, came conscious thoughts. Too strong. Isaac thought, remembering what had happened. The opponent was stronger, faster, more skilled and possessed a flurry of abilities which Isaac stood no chance against. Damn it! Was he in over his head? Did he let his success in the Dark Continent cloud his judgment, making him arrogant and cocky? Maybe. Perhaps it was just that, or maybe Isaac just had the bad luck of encountering such a terror. Tisk, luck. Over and over, Isaac was reminded of his powerlessness. The Dark Continent, barely killing Silver, and now this. It made him feel a flurry of emotions. Annoyance, contempt, and most prominently, rage. Usually, Isaac was good at suppressing his emotions. But not today. Today, he let them take over. He gave in to the demons in his mind. The rage, the anger, and the vengeance. He let them all consume him. I'll kill him. The Juggernaut stomped toward Isaac, seeing the boy barely on his feet as his knees buckled and blood dripped from his body. The hole in his stomach healed, but it was evident that to achieve this, he had to neglect the rest of his wounds. Dashing toward the boy, it was ready to go for the kill. However, as Isaac raised his head, revealing his face, the Juggernaut quickly noticed something. A change in his eyes. They were crimson. Nen proficiency, 3-6. Ren. Boom. The Nen exploded from the boy's body as the aura expanded to sizes that had almost reached the tip of the tall trees above. Faltering in his steps, the Juggernaut stopped his assault before it was too late. It wasn't stupid. Even a terror possessed their simple survival instincts, and the Juggernaut's instincts were telling him it was dangerous. As evidenced by the visible dark aura oozing out from the boy, or in other words, his bloodlust. That hesitation. The boy muttered. I like it. The words seemed to have reached the Juggernaut, as it brought its hands together. Clap. Where the Juggernaut once stood, was now a tree which had been uprooted, soon tipping and beginning to fall. Meanwhile, the tree behind Isaac had disappeared as the Juggernaut stood in its place, swinging its hand which was shrouded in the blue and black aura. However, to its surprise, Isaac's head was turned just enough so that his eyes stared straight at the creature. Bang! The boy was pushed back, digging into the ground with his feet planted, holding onto the hand, his fingers wrapped around it. Coming to a stop, Isaac glared as the Juggernaut failed to escape from his grasp. One could see Isaac's ren shrinking, compacting into a single point around his fist as the rest of his body was left defenseless. The same thing he'd seen the Juggernaut do all this time. He could feel it. The power in his fist. All his aura in a single point. Pulling back his hand, Isaac yanked the Juggernaut's hand, causing the terror to stumble forward. Bastard! Boom! Isaac's powered fist bludgeoned into the side of the Juggernaut's head as a devastating boom rang out. Isaac followed through with the punch, gritting his teeth and ignoring the pain, causing the Juggernaut to fall off balance and crash into the ground, his head squashed in between Isaac's fist and the earth below. This is the power of the Scarlet Eyes. Chapter 53, A thread has been woven too. Isaac could feel the change in his body after the Scarlet Eyes were activated. His Nen was far greater than what it was 10 minutes ago, and for the first time in the battle against the Juggernaut, he was able to land a blow. As his aura broke its form around Isaac's hand, returning to its regular Ren, he couldn't help but appreciate the power. I would have struggled with that as a level 3 Nen user, but it came so naturally. Everything about his aura was different. From the slight sensory awareness he gained as long as someone was in his Ren's space, allowing him to follow the Juggernaut's blinking, and the technique he was able to perform just now, giving him immense power in that punch. Not to mention the obvious changes like his immense Ren. Not as great as Netero, though. Not yet. Clap. Isaac couldn't help but fall into this trance, the change in his Nen seeming fascinating to him. However, upon hearing a familiar clap, he regained his composure. And with it, came the flood of emotions he'd been feeling. Staring at the Juggernaut which had teleported a few feet away, one could see the side of its head cave in as the teeth and eyes on that side all loosened. Contrary to its previous oppressive manner and fighting style, the Juggernaut seemed more reserved as it paused, staring at Isaac. What's wrong? Scared? The anger, fear, and powerlessness the Juggernaut made him feel, he was planning to return it tenfold. In a flash, Isaac disappeared from his position, appearing beside the terror and swinging his fist as the Juggernaut was just then turning his head, but he was too slow. Bang! A clean blow landed on the Juggernaut as its head swung back. But despite the attack causing damage, it was severely weaker than the previous blow. Isaac refused to give the Juggernaut even a moment to rest, as he swung his leg in a roundhouse kick. However, this time it was blocked with the Juggernaut's forearm. In retaliation, the Juggernaut followed the same motion, driving an elbow into Isaac's gut, and making the boy clench his teeth. He's intentionally going for my most damaged area, Isaac thought, but he was only slightly pushed back. Despite the blood trickling down the side of his mouth, his durability had increased with his strength and speed. He's more skilled, but I'm stronger and faster. Blow after blow, the two fought at blurring speeds. Isaac was clearly faster, as he weaved and acrobatically avoided the attacks, while the Juggernaut blocked with its bulky physique. However, as the Juggernaut threw a roundhouse kick, aiming for the ribs, Isaac prepared to block, only to witness the leg halt, quickly changing altitude and cracking him across the side of his face. The Juggernaut then lowered its body, aiming to sweep the legs. But Isaac was able to predict this and hop in the air, dodging it. Shit! Isaac cursed, watching the Juggernaut follow its sweeping motion and raise its opposite leg. It wanted me to jump. With nowhere to run, Isaac crossed his arms in an X shape as the Juggernaut drove its heel into his arms. Landing back on the ground, Isaac was successful in grabbing the leg of the Juggernaut, allowing him to prevent shooting into the forest. However, before he could get up, the Juggernaut was upon him. It seemed it regained some of its confidence over time. Isaac swiftly rolled out of the way of the Juggernaut's attack, hopping to his feet and dashing back. The two once again engaged in a back and forth, both individuals holding their ground. The Juggernaut knew this was no longer him playing with his food. He was fighting for survival. Meanwhile, Isaac fought while he let his rage control him, allowing him to keep the scarlet eyes active and fight with all the more ferocity. However, the back and forth came to a stop as Isaac saw an opportunity. Twisting his body, Isaac swung his heel, aiming for the opening he'd seen, the side of the Juggernaut's head. However, the Juggernaut let out a satisfied, HGR. As if it had declared its win already. Turning its head, its gaping mouth with countless razor-sharp teeth prepared to chomp off the boy's leg. But in an act that seemed familiar to the Juggernaut, Isaac's leg halted, pulling back as he used the same momentum to swing his body the other way, landing his opposite heel on the back of the Juggernaut's head with an incredible show of speed. The Juggernaut stumbled a few steps. Isaac was prepared to use the Juggernaut's momentum against him and to land a blow as the Juggernaut came into it. And the terror knew Isaac thought this. Clap! Bringing its hands together, it switched with the only twig it had noticed, appearing beside Isaac. YS-51. The pressure point is responsible for hip movement. Isaac seemingly disappeared from his position, simply ducking faster than the Juggernaut could see. Soon, Isaac pulled his finger out from the hip of the Juggernaut as blood oozed out. The muscle around the terror was so thick, that Isaac needed to dig his finger a few centimeters in to deactivate the point, to which he succeeded. Meanwhile, the Juggernaut was left perplexed. As the fight went on, the boy was closing the gap in fighting ability, the only advantage the terror had. The boy was adapting. The feint, the preparedness for his swap, and now he couldn't feel the lower side of his body, making it near impossible to control his leg as he usually could. However, as the terror thought this, a heavy blow, as if a bus had rammed into him, crashed into his disabled side. Because his footing was off, he was sent skidding across the ground, soon coming to a stop as all its eyes couldn't help but stare at the boy. Contrary to its previous stares, as if it were locking onto its prey, this time it stared as though it were a child hearing a slight rustle amongst the darkness. Pure and unprecedented helplessness. How does it feel? The boy walked toward it. The pain, the fear, and the powerlessness. How does it feel to die to the weak? Isaac's eyes, beautiful at first glance, making one fall into a mesmerizing trance whilst gazing upon it, had lost all its allure as it seemed to complement Isaac's bloodlust, only reminding the Juggernaut of the inevitable pain and suffering that was to come. Meanwhile, amongst Isaac's rage, another emotion was making his knees shake. Excitement. He liked it. He liked being stronger. He liked seeing the eyes of the Juggernaut as they dimmed and lost all hope. He liked stepping on those who previously made him suffer. He could chase this feeling his whole life and never get bored of it. However, upon thinking this, an explosion of aura erupted from where the Juggernaut lay as a feral howl could be heard. The Juggernaut stood with a hunch in its back, the lower side to the left of his body visibly shaking, while the blue and black aura shrouded its entire body. Meanwhile, Isaac stayed quiet. Instead, a wide smile appeared on his face. His scarlet eyes shone brighter as he lost himself more and more to his emotions. Using its one working leg, the Juggernaut kicked off the ground with a bang as it shot toward Isaac. The boy did the same as he disappeared from his position, the two individuals traveling toward each other at blurring speeds. The Juggernaut's black and blue aura suddenly disappeared, as he swung back. It was preparing to land the black and red attack from before. Isaac knew this, but he didn't care. His rationale was clouded by the build-up of his unrelenting emotions, as evidenced by the grin that reached from ear to ear. His aura shrunk as it coated itself around Isaac's fist. In an instant, the two appeared before each other. The both of them knew, despite their obvious broken mentality. This was it. The final stretch. A battle which would be engraved into the soil of Ravenwood. As their two fists were a microsecond from colliding, red lightning suddenly appeared as Isaac's fist bared every drop of aura in his body. Crackle. Boom. What is this? An old man in a cabin, wearing what looked to be a janitor's suit, stared at a tablet, watching spikes rising suddenly. That's the green zone. There shouldn't be a terror of that caliber appearing over there. It should be no lower than the yellow zone. The old man suddenly recalled the masked figure which was currently in the green zone. Dropping to his seat, the old man rubbed his forehead as he let out a slight sigh. Unfortunate. He muttered. I should call the guild to sort this out. The worst-case scenario is a terror from the red zone has trespassed into the yellow zone, making all the terrors there flee to the green. If this is the case, there is no doubt there will be a few lost lives. The old man grabbed a watch from his desk. He could only hope nothing unpredictable happened. Otherwise, there was truly no hope for the masked man. In the middle of the green zone, a large area could be seen from a bird's eye view, devoid of any tree or lush vegetation you'd expect from the forest, especially upon looking at the surroundings. However, the area seemed as though a bomb had just been dropped. Even the dirt below had scattered, leaving nothing but solid ground. Destroyed and large pieces of wood embedded into the ground, the absence of anything to depict the area was once a forest, and two individuals in the middle of it all. One stood while the other lay on the ground, staring into the sky and unmoving as if he were dead. However, they both had one thing in common. Both of their arms had been blown off. Hey! Isaac breathed out as he stared at the laying Juggernaut whose shoulder and part of his neck and ribs were missing. Meanwhile, his arm was severed from the shoulder, however, in the short time he'd been standing over the corpse, it had regrown to his elbow. Isaac was sure the Juggernaut was dead. There was no sort of energy or aura coming off of it, and it no longer breathed. With his scarlet eyes still active, dimming as the seconds went past and indicating its inevitable deactivation, Isaac stared, his mind blank. He was completely drained. His body felt weak like he was about to collapse at any moment, and the only reason he didn't was because the scarlet eyes still provided him with strength. His mind was a mess. Both mentally, and even emotionally, Isaac felt weak. I wanna sleep. He let out, unknowingly speaking out loud as he spoke his mind. Turning back, Isaac looked around for his belongings, as well as the man, hoping to scavenge whatever was left for him as an apology. It was Isaac's vital strike and absent mind that had killed the man after all. However, before he could, his tired eyes shot wide open as life seemed to return to them. A dark and ominous feeling enshrouded everything around him. Snapping his head back, he noticed the Juggernaut still lying on the ground, only this time, it had its last arm raised straight in the air. How, it was dead, it still is, I can't feel any life coming from it. A wave of pitch-black aura exploded from the Juggernaut, surrounding everything in the devoid area, including Isaac. This is just its pure pettiness and willpower, its final attack. Isaac could tell the Juggernaut didn't have long left. The energy inside it would ultimately disappear. This was clearly a last-ditch effort, and Isaac wasn't planning to stay and see what was to come next. However, he was too late. He failed to find a way out. He couldn't see anything and there was no end to the darkness. It was like the whole area had become the Juggernaut's territory, its domain. Snap! Bringing its two fingers together, the Juggernaut snapped them against each other. And with it, the area instantly returned to normal, both the Juggernaut and Isaac seemingly disappearing into thin air as it did. A thread has been woven. Chapter 54, A thread has been woven 3. As his amber eyes flickered open, a boy inside a dense and vast forest came to his senses as he shot up from the ground. However, before he could do anything else, he dropped to the ground, just as quickly as he came up. Isaac, his body fully healed, gripped his stomach as his eyes became bloodshot and his consciousness drifted. Hunger. Status, starving. He'd been healing severe wounds all this time, causing his hunger to grow. And even after channeling his main supply of nin toward the thing, it proved useless. His skin turned darker and the amber color in his eyes dulled, becoming grey as the seconds passed. Isaac writhed on the ground, clawing at the dirt below as he tried to formulate a thought. A buzzing vibration could be heard as Countess Vita Flow pills appeared in Isaac's hand. This was the last thing he'd spent money on before coming to Ravenwood. And because he spent money on all these Vita Flow pills, he was back to being broke. But at the moment, he didn't care. Taking a handful of the Vita Flow, Isaac downed the see-through pills, swallowing instantly as he felt a wave of energy enter him. To any normal person, this amount of Vita Flow at once, no matter the PS, could never be good. As evidenced by Silver turning into a rampaging animal. However, for Isaac, he wasn't the one using the Noonan entering his body. And because of this, like a vacuum, the thing inside him swallowed the Noonan, giving Isaac some comfort. Rolling on the ground as facing the sky, Isaac breathed in and out. There goes most of my money, gone in one go. It pained Isaac to think about the money he'd spent on the Vita Flow. It had to be noted that Nin Vita Flow were one of the most expensive in the market. This reason was because other than Vita Flow, there weren't many medicines that rejuvenated Nin. At least, not as well as Vita Flow. Meanwhile, the market was filled with mana recovery potions, therefore, Vita Flow mana pills price was lowered to better the competition in the medical industry. Isaac was forced to bear the fruits of his PS, no matter how expensive those fruits were. Where am I? Sitting up, Isaac looked around, only to find himself in a forest, similar to the one he'd just been in, but he could tell the forest was a different one. The taller and thicker trees, its branches growing to such sizes that it cast a shadow on the forest below, making it seem all the more ominous, the thicker and more lush vegetation, as well as plants and fruits which seemed straight out of a fantasy novel. However, amongst this all, what caught Isaac's attention the most was the laying Juggernaut, its arm still raised straight in the air. Isaac only stared, looking back to his own body. My body is healed, so I must have been here for a while. If it were still alive, I'd already be dead. But let's just make sure. Isaac stood, walking about to walk over to the Juggernaut, however, he halted in his steps as he noticed a figure in the corner of his eye. I was wondering how long it would take you to notice me. A large man with jet black hair and a muscular physique sat on a log as he rested his arms on his thighs, leaning in as he stared at Isaac intently. His voice was low and heavy, yet slow and controlled. Meanwhile, Isaac couldn't help but stare, looking back to a few seconds ago, and how he couldn't have noticed the man a few meters away from him. It wasn't like the man was trying to hide either. Who are you? Isaac asked, however, rather than an answer the man pointed toward the Juggernaut. Don't worry about that. It's dead, I made sure. Todo Aoi. If I'm not mistaken, that should be the character the Terror has inherited, of the Jujutsu Kaisen verse. Isaac looked between the man and the Terror, raising his eyebrow as he did. How can you tell? Isaac asked. I've encountered it before. That swapping curse technique is pesky, hey? Besides, seeing as you guys dropped out from nowhere, it was all I needed. The man explained. Encountered. Man, I really need to research the verses that exist. I'm clueless here. But what I want to know. The man's voice suddenly became heavier, making Isaac's hairs stand and involuntarily harden his chin. What the hell are you? From what I saw, when you got here, you looked like you were on the brink of death. Now here you are. How long has he been watching me? What's his aim? Isaac had countless questions running through his mind, however, he didn't want to interrupt the man speak. Let me guess. Vampire? You don't look like any demon I know of. Cool. No, I simply have a perk that allows me to heal at rapid speeds. The man stayed quiet as he stared. Is that so? Rising to his feet, the man stretched. Standing at around 192 centimeters, 6'3", his tall stature paired well with his burly physique. Meanwhile, Isaac stood at a measly 179 centimeters, 5'9", with quite the skinny physique from having to live through starvation most of his childhood. Let's test the capabilities of your healing, shall we, zombie boy? Isaac furrowed his eyebrows as he took a step back. He didn't know who this man was or what his abilities were. There was no benefit to him staying here any longer. Forget the carcass. I'll get another some other time. Turning back, Isaac prepared to activate Ren and make a run for the forest, only for his legs to refuse his thoughts. My legs, they won't move. Looking up, into the shadowy forest, Isaac felt something coming from it. He couldn't explain, no, he was having a hard time comprehending it. Was it power? Bloodlust? Or his own fear? Maybe a combination of all three. Either way, Isaac felt as though hundreds of gazes were upon him. I'm surprised you noticed that. Your survival instincts are on point. They are with me. Don't worry, they won't attack, I say so. Turning his head, Isaac put on a forced smile as sweat dripped down the side of his face. They? Yes. Haven't you realized by now? Where you are? The man's eyes intensified. What is he? The red zone. That's where the Juggernaut has brought you. I guess he wanted to take you down with him. Isaac's eyes widened as his breathing fell uneven. Our red zone. You can't escape. So enter Zetsu and come at me. The man's words seemed to snap Isaac out from his thoughts. Calm down. Nothing will come from panicking. But more importantly, Isaac had his suspicions, but he didn't know for sure. He didn't want to assume. There seemed to be no sort of energy coming from the man. Mana, Nan, chakra and whatever the Juggernaut was using. Nothing. As far as Isaac could tell, the man was nothing more than a regular human. Therefore, he felt slightly more comfortable in suppressing his Nan. Although, rather than Zetsu, he fed his Nan to the thing inside him, quelling his hunger a little and putting him in a state similar to Zestu. It wasn't like Isaac had a choice anyway. My little friends here have informed me on the battle you had with the Terror. How you barely survived, your fighting skills. Your, Nan. The man paused for a second, continuing. So let's see it. Come at me. Breathing in, Isaac complied as he kicked off the ground, shooting toward the man. I'll play his game for now, until I can find a way to escape. Appearing before the man, Isaac stayed reserved, throwing a simple jab to start things off. Assume nothing. Everything is possible. As Isaac thought this, he watched as the man effortlessly turned his head, dodging the punch and raised his arm, cracking it across the side of Isaac's face. Isaac stumbled, his consciousness flattering and vision dizzying. You fight like a wimp. The man muttered. What? Although he was a regular human without Nan at the moment, with the Zaldic genes that had reinforced both his muscles and bones, Isaac was nothing short of a superhuman. Despite that, the man's simple punch had caused him to almost be knocked out. However, he still had his tolerance. And it was because of this he was able to quickly recover. Turning his head, he took a step back, leaving the man's range as he watched his opponent with his arms crossed, still in the same position. The both of them stayed quiet as Isaac breathed out, once again engaging. Moving low, Isaac stared at the man, watching his opponent follow him with his eyes yet not move an inch. Swinging his leg, Isaac aimed for a sweep. He isn't reacting. What was once supposed to be a feint, failed as Isaac watched the man stand still as if he were a statue. Therefore, he decided to commit to the attack, smashing his foot into the man's ankle. However, the man wouldn't budge. What the hell is wrong with this guy? Hopping into the air, Isaac continued his assault, driving his knee into the air and aiming for the man's chin. However, he was blocked by a simple palm, cutting his momentum halfway as he dropped back onto the ground, leaping back. Running circles around the man, Isaac tried to look for an opening, to which he soon did, running toward the man's back. Leaping into the air, Isaac drew closer to the man. As he did, the man turned his head back, the usual scowl painted across his face. Gotcha! Isaac swung his hand as he tossed a handful of dirt into the man's eyes, dropping back onto the ground and changing position to land a blow. But, it was useless. His eyes are still open. Isaac noticed. Stubbornness, willpower, or just pure stupidity. Whatever it was, the man's reddened eyes refused to blink for comfort, following Isaac and blocking his attack. Damn it! Isaac was growing impatient. He released a flurry of attacks, each fueled by his annoyance for the man's nonchalant attitude, as if he were dealing with nothing but a simple ant. He let his emotions erupt. This was because he needed the scarlet eyes. If he was to survive this mystery man, and the beasts lurking in the shadows, as well as escalating Ravenwood as a whole, he needed the power he had against the Juggernaut. Therefore, every emotion, rage at the Juggernaut for bringing him here, the slight fear he felt from the man before him and the beasts around him. Anything. He set all his emotions loose and... Wrong. The man suddenly leaned in, passing through all of Isaac's attacks as he whispered something in the boy's ear. As he did, a large fist landed straight in the middle of Isaac's face as blood gushed out, sending him skidding a few meters, soon coming to a stop. They told me about your battle. How you were on the verge of death, but survived because you succumbed to your emotions. Isaac could hear the man's voice as he slowly got back up, wiping the blood off his face and ignoring the delirious feeling. That's where you're wrong. Yes, emotions can fuel your power. This is especially the case for Nin. I know. However, you'll get nowhere if you can't control your emotions. Don't let them dictate your actions. Use your emotions, wield them like a weapon, a tool, and use them to slay your opponent. Isaac stared. No control of your emotions means no control over yourself, and no control over yourself means no control over your power, making you no better than that terror right there. A mindless beast, succumbed to its basic desires. Isaac tried to retort, but he couldn't. He remembered himself when fighting the Juggernaut. The way he fought, the way he spoke, his excitement. He'd become an animal. And if he were being honest, he craved that feeling. Even now. The man's glare intensified. A weakling hiding behind his cowardice. Silence enveloped the area as Isaac's face darkened. Ha, how ironic. All this time, Isaac loathed his powerlessness, yet right now, he was being accused of his immense power meaning nothing. A powerful weakling. Power isn't just the strength in your fist. A true human's power comes from within, the rage, the emotions he uses to drive himself. His willpower, his guts. My guts. Isaac stood to his feet. He couldn't help but wonder. If he were to master this, controlling his emotions and using them like a weapon, not only could he master his scarlet eyes, but he would also grow immensely in strength. Lesson number 1, control your emotions, don't let them control you. The man spoke, raising a single finger. Yes. Good. The man grinned slightly for the first time. As the seconds passed, Isaac couldn't help but change the view he had on his situation. As the seconds passed, he thought less of this situation as one of survival, and started to think of it as something else. An opportunity. Chapter 55, a thread has been woven for. Keep your cool, a level head. In a dense and shadowy forest, sharp exhales and fists landing on skin could be heard as Isaac could be seen unleashing countless attacks on the mysterious man. However, no matter how much Isaac attacked, it proved futile as the man blocked and predicted Isaac's next moves. I still haven't moved him from his position. Always keep your heart and mind separate. Use the emotions from your heart to fuel your power, but never let it interfere with your calculative mind. The two can never coexist as one. The man spoke during Isaac's assaults. Usually, Isaac would think twice before taking a random strange man's advice. And he was never one to act upon his emotions. However, he couldn't help but see the validity in the man's words. He did indeed let his heart take over and turn off his mind. Like when I clashed with the terror. With my speed at the time, I could have easily dodged that, ending him at once. It might have even left me with enough energy to prevent teleporting to the red zone. To access the power of the scarlet eyes and paying a little too much attention to the detail, Isaac thought taking this route of becoming a berserker was best till he leveled up the eyes. However, he was wrong. Only now was he starting to learn the flaws in his plan, and it almost cost him his life. Maybe not life. I am an immortal after all. But being in the middle of creatures that are vastly stronger than me, with no chance of escaping. It might as well be death. I'd lose my freedom. He had gotten greedy. Taking shortcuts for power only ended up forming a weakness for him. And the man must have known this too, after all, he too watched Isaac's fights. Although, Isaac was curious about how the man's information and advice seemed a little too accurate. As if he was experienced in this. Controlling, no, using his emotions. As Isaac suffered a heavy blow once again, forcing him to take a few steps back, he couldn't help but notice the churning feeling in his stomach. After fighting and healing for a few hours, the hunger was starting to slowly grow worse and worse. But he could still endure it. Thinking this, Isaac stood up straight, taking in a deep breath and closing his eyes. Although his emotional state was fairly neutral at the moment, he didn't let this stop his practice, clinging onto any wisp of emotion. He focused on them, empowering them as if he were pouring gasoline on fire, yet didn't let them consume him. Snapping his eyes open, the man noticed a glint of crimson in Isaac's eyes, as the boy disappeared from his position. He's gotten faster. The man was slightly taken aback, raising both arms as a heavy blow landed on his forearms. Isaac's shin connected with the man's forearms, pushing his opponent back as his feet tore through the dirt below. Well done, you got me to move. The man spoke, his unkind expression never faltering. However, as he spoke, he noticed the boy before him touch the ground, instantly shooting back toward him. This might be my only chance. Using the little time he had with the scarlet eyes, Isaac prepared to summon his Nin. Not so fast. However, it was as if the man could read Isaac's mind, moving before Isaac could have a chance to do anything. And with Isaac shooting toward him, it wasn't long until the man reached him while doing the same, almost instant. With a sharp breath, the man swung his fist, to which Isaac twisted his body midair to dodge. With the physical boost the Scarlet Eyes offered, he could compete with the man's incredible physique. However, the Scarlet Eyes was a short activation at the moment, meaning it had already started to fade and his physical boost left with it. It was because of these reasons that Isaac's next block meant nothing, the man's fist passing right through and hitting Isaac across the chin as the boy's brain smashed into the walls of his skull. His consciousness faded as he dropped to the ground. Although, if he were being honest, a small part of him didn't mind this. He wanted to rest. It had been a long day. I know you're awake. The mysterious man, sitting before a small fire as the sun had long set, spoke as Isaac lay a few feet away. After a few seconds, Isaac's body moved slightly as he picked himself off the ground, and sat up. I thought you'd have left. Or fed me to whatever is out there. No, I'm not here because I want to be. I'm waiting. And I'm pretty sure those things out there don't eat humans. Well, maybe some of them do. Who knows? The man spoke without taking his eyes off the fire. It seemed he was grilled some sort of meat on a stick. Nothing that looked appetizing to Isaac. So they don't belong to you. For some reason, the man seemed to be feeding Isaac's curiosity. Isaac couldn't tell if it was because he didn't see Isaac as a threat, or simply didn't care to keep secrets. Either way, he just wanted his question answered. Belong? No, of course not. They simply listen to my commands because that's how they're programmed. However, despite the man answering Isaac's questions, they seemed to only confuse the boy even further. What do you mean? The man slightly turned his head so that his eyes met Isaac's. How much do you know about Ravenwood? The man asked, confusing Isaac. However, Isaac still made sure to answer. It's a dumping ground created by the SA to discard terrors without expending too many resources. So you know nothing. The man cut Isaac off. Seeing the man about to continue, Isaac rejected the urge to snap back. Do you think the SA, known for being extra cautious and controlling, would allow a place like Ravenwood to exist? I don't know. Other than the chairman and his son, my knowledge is limited. Isaac thought this but made sure not to say it out loud. No, this is the work of a third party. These terrors are nothing more than failed experiments. Even that Juggernaut. Although they are technically a terror, they are far more terrifying than a regular terror. The man turned his head back, checking to see if whatever he was cooking was ready. Failed? Experiments of who? What were they trying to accomplish? Isaac couldn't hold himself back, letting out his questions. Maybe it was the dark and eerie atmosphere that made the man's words seem like a scary story, or the possibility of attaining knowledge even the SA didn't know that made Isaac crave more. You ever hear of possession? Isaac was taken aback slightly, his face contorting to one of surprise as he started to piece the mystery together. I guess you have. Whenever these terrors fail to attain the desired forms of their masters, they're disposed of here. Ravenwood. The hell cursed with failures. But they still have their uses. After a second of silence, Isaac leaned forward. But who? The SA? The Hearts Guild? No. The SA would never. They have their own contorted sense of justice that would never allow them to do such a thing. And the Hearts Guild is simply too weak and small. Even if they had the resources to do it, they'd instantly be sniffed out by the SA. The man bit into his food, offering it to Isaac, to which the boy quickly shook his head. People forcing possessions to be born. Is that even possible? How would they do it? Hell, is it even people doing this? Isaac had countless questions. He knew from the moment Oliver had told him that a government organization wouldn't do something as careless as creating Ravenwood, but who knew it was a whole conspiracy? Blinking as if he'd realized something, Isaac stared at the man. Wait a minute, if these terrors listen to him, doesn't that mean? Who are you? And what are you doing here? Isaac asked, his heartbeat quickening in anticipation. The man paused slightly, taking another bite from his food before answering. I told you. I'm waiting. I just so happen to be using you as a way to cure my boredom as I do. Taking the last bite and tossing the stick, the man turned to Isaac. Which brings me to my next point. Lesson number 2, quit fighting like a wimp. Isaac snapped out of his trance as he heard this. Before he could ask any questions, the man continued. What's the level of your hand-to-hand perk? Isaac wasn't surprised the man knew he had this perk. Anyone skilled in something usually had it manifested in a perk. It just so happened that Isaac too had been meaning to check his status. Status. Name, Isaac. Status, intense hungry. Stage, 1. Inherited character, wanderer. Race, human. PS, Nun, proficiency level, 3. Hatsu, N/A. Perks. Immortality, LVL max. Zaldic genes, LVL max. You possess an innate talent and potential for the art of assassination, hunting, and covert operations. This genetic gift allows you to learn and develop your skills at a rapid rate. Hand-to-hand combat, LVL 3. You are a skilled hand-to-hand fighter, able to use your body as a weapon. Vital strike, LVL 1. You now have the knowledge and skill to precisely target and shut down your opponent's pressure point. Tolerance, LVL 1. You're able to tolerate physical pain, poisons and mind attacks to a certain extent. National treasure. Scarlet eyes, mastery level, high beginner. One of the 7 most beautiful colors in the world, the scarlet eyes of the Kurta hold immense power and potential. Eyes will change to scarlet only when an emotion is notable. Arts. N/A. Curse. Zabi disease. Haunted by calamity. Everything looked the same as last time, only the hand-to-hand perk had increased by a level. Only when an emotion is notable. It increased a sub-level, so I'm assuming my efforts have paid off and I don't need to become an animal to activate it. As evidenced by a few hours ago against the man. Level 3, Isaac answered. Mine is level 4. As the man said this, Isaac couldn't help but doubt his words. That can't be. Not with the way you were effortlessly fighting me a few hours ago. Isaac was assuming a car higher level. The gaps in levels were noticeable, however, the two of them were nowhere near close to the fighting ability to be only a 1-level difference. The man didn't answer, only raised his hand and opened his palm. Haven't you noticed by now? The calluses? My main weapon isn't my hand-to-hand combat. It's a sword. Isaac yelped in surprise, seeing the man's calluses. He'd slowly started to grow the same types of calluses when using the bone sword back in the Dark Continent. Yes. But the difference between our hand-to-hand, other than the measly 1 level, is our mentality. Isaac's ears perked. You're too reserved. You do the exact opposite of what is needed to survive. Because you're somewhat fast, you've adapted to always reacting to your opponent. Your fighting style is lacking dominance, grit, and balls. Normal humans have to worry about injuries and pain, but since you're a zombie boy, your healing and very obvious tolerance to pain will make you a feared combatant. A hand-to-hand demon. He noticed my tolerance perk. Thinking back, Isaac could see why. After every punch, he simply got up nonchalantly despite his injuries accumulated after the attack. Dominance. If he was being honest, he couldn't quite grasp it, and he was given no time to even try. Get up. We'll continue. Taking a deep breath, Isaac hopped to his feet, getting into his stance, though still wary of the man's mysteriousness. Before we start, what's your name? Isaac asked, however, he was quick to notice the silence as the man gazed into the deep and dark forest. Following his line of sight, Isaac couldn't find or sense anything unusual. Hey! What? The man turned back, snapping out of his trance. I asked what your name is. Wayne. Isaac raised an eyebrow. Sounds a bit fake. Like it's out of a comic book or something. But who am I to judge people's names? Isaac shrugged it off, as on the opposite side, Wayne couldn't help but ponder. He's near. Simultaneously, a screen appeared before Isaac. A thread has been woven. What? This again? Chapter 56, Losing Control 1. In a dense forest as the sun approached the center of the sky, indicating it was almost noon, a boy with amber eyes, sitting on a log stared into the air as he looked to be deep in thought. A thread has been woven. What thread? No matter how much he thought, Isaac couldn't figure out the meaning behind the text. It's supposed to be the work of a calamity, but it doesn't seem to be any calamity I know. Isaac hadn't encountered many calamities in the Dark Continent. If he was considering calamities as every creature in the Dark Continent, then it would be a fair amount. But the title of calamities was one created by Dawn Freaks to signify some of the most dangerous he'd come across, capable of human extinction. If I'm being honest, the calamities aren't the worst of the bunch. Some of the most unique, maybe. But in terms of threat, I'd only rank them an 8 out of 10 within the Dark Continent. It seemed Dawn figured this out too, seeing as his second book depicted far more terrifying and dangerous creatures. For example, the fortune teller, Curiosity's Price. A creature that seemed innocent at first, promising it could tell you the future. To which it did. However, upon telling you the greatest and happiest moments in your life, it implants disasters sure to occur right after. Or the Guardian, Greed's Result. This Guardian would promise you immortality and longevity. It wasn't lying. It would grant you exactly that in the form of a small lotus flower. However, this immortality was really just the zombie disease. The lotus flower was the same lotus the insect had shoved down Isaac's throat. Therefore, it wouldn't be an understatement to say Isaac was well versed in the topic of calamities. Yet he still had no idea what could be haunting him, making the curse all the more terrifying. And as time went on, the same screen kept appearing before Isaac, more times than it usually did. Because of this, he couldn't help but think something was afoot. And the constant messages appearing all became far worse since Isaac had met him. Wayne. What are you staring at? Wayne asked, standing a few feet away from Isaac with his usual stoic expression. Nothing, Isaac answered simply, shaking his head. Good, then get up. Break's over. Isaac quickly complied as he stood, moving a few meters away from Wayne. As he did, he closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. Since he'd met Wayne, his very obvious lack of experience during combat was far less notable now. But still not perfect. It wasn't long until he kicked off the ground, almost instantly coming face to face with Wayne. Pulling back his arm, Isaac twisted his hips, putting as much strength as he could into his punch. His fist connected with Wayne's forearm as the large man blocked, however, due to the strength of the attack, he could not help but take a step back. Seeing Wayne pushed back, off balance, Isaac leapt in. However, it seemed as though Wayne had anticipated this, swinging his dominant fist and striking Isaac in the middle of his face. However, Isaac did not falter. He stayed in his same position, as if the attack was nothing to him, despite the blood pouring from his nose. Instead, he leapt off his feet, coiling his arms and legs around Wayne's arm, twisting and bending. He endured that attack to attempt to break my arm. Wayne thought, raising his second arm to try to escape. Meanwhile, Isaac followed the man's actions with his eyes. Now. However, upon Wayne raising his arm and aiming to strike Isaac, the boy skillfully detached from the arm, slithering up Wayne's body like a snake till he wrapped his arm around the man's neck. Wayne's eyes were slightly widened as the arm quickly started to tighten around his neck. He waited till I was vulnerable, till I attacked prematurely in fear for my arm. Meanwhile, Isaac grinned as he channeled all his strength into squeezing Wayne's neck, hoping to knock him unconscious. This is it. He'll go to sleep, and I'll have to act fast. I'm assuming the creatures will attack, but I should be able to. Before Isaac could finish plotting, his thoughts were cut short as he witnessed Wayne's face reddening to disturbing degrees, yet the man simply turned his head with force, meeting Isaac's eyes. Isaac could see it. The ferocity in the man's glare. The stubbornness. Seeing this, Isaac was slightly taken aback. However, rather than loosening his grip in surprise, he tightened it, quickly wanting to end the man. As he did, he felt Wayne's posture change as the large man bent his legs. In the next second, Isaac's grip faltered as Wayne leapt 20 feet into the air, his body slowly facing upwards as Isaac quickly realized what was happening. He's planning to sandwich me between his large body and the ground. And from this height? Isaac looked down, practically shivering at what would come if he didn't release Wayne. And so, he released Wayne, safely landing on his feet as Wayne twisted his body, easily catching himself. Are you sure you didn't want to commit to that rear naked choke? Your healing and pain resistance could have allowed you to stay conscious and outlast me. Isaac shook his head. There's no guarantee I could have endured that fall. Even if I did, you didn't look like you'd give up anytime soon. There were too many cons for a payoff that was never guaranteed. The man stared at Isaac, without saying anything word, his usual scowl making him seem like he had a bad day. Don't tell me that still makes me a wimp. However, Isaac's worries were void as he witnessed Wayne give a slight nod. Not bad. Isaac paused, soon puffing out his chest in pride. Now, lesson number 3. Oh please, Wayne. Don't lie to the boy. A majestic and seductive female voice came from the darkness as Isaac snapped his head toward where it was coming from. You would have never let that opportunity pass. Not if your arm was cut off, or your eye was stabbed out. You'd have never released that poor individual from that choke. Looking to the forest, Isaac witnessed a tall female with crimson red and similarly colored long hair, covering her right eye, pairing well with her red eyes and beautiful red dress. The dress was parted by the side, allowing for one leg to freely move in the wind, allowing Isaac to see her porcelain smooth thighs. To put it simply, she was beautiful. However, this wasn't enough for Isaac to become distracted, as he prepared to summon his Nin at any moment. I believe this was the best way to teach him, based upon his personality and who he is, Ms. Jane. Wayne's voice rang out, as Isaac could see him with a slight bow, his right hand cupping his left breast, in some sort of salute. What? He's ridiculous. Don't you think it would be better to train a youngling to become another you? How exciting would that be? The female, who Wayne had called Jane, bit her red lips as she spoke with an alluring tone, her eyes sharp and peering upon Wayne. However, Wayne slightly raised his gaze, and spoke with his usual hoarse voice, not affected a single bit by the female's behavior. He isn't me. He said simply, prompting Jane to stay silent and stare. Soon, she took a step forward, walking toward Wayne as she stood before him, running her fingers down the side of his face. Yet, he continued to stay unaffected. Have you completed your task? She asked, slowly moving closer. Yes. He once again answered simply. Astounding. It won't be long now. As this all happened, Isaac simply stared as he couldn't help but blink a few times. What the hell am I watching? Isaac was dumbfounded as he watched the scene before him. However, he instantly switched to a serious demeanor as he heard the next words come out of Jane's mouth. Since we're leaving, you have no more use for that child, am I right? The female asked, averting her gaze to Isaac. No, I do not. Good. Kill him. Isaac's heartbeat quickened as he summoned his Nin. Ren. Aura exploded from Isaac's body as he prepared to make a run for it. The female waved her finger. Absolute cancel. In an instant, Isaac could feel the Nin in his body disappear, deactivating his Ren. Wayne, have you met our newest member? Or should I say, creation? A female stood behind Jane. She was young, not much older than Isaac. She wore a simple leather jacket and jeans with high-heeled boots. Her short black, maybe even purple, hair sat on her shoulders as the female stood with both her arms pointing out toward Isaac. Our second perfect experiment. State your name, girl. The girl lowered her arms, facing Wayne. Greetings. My name is Merlin. Isn't she fascinating? She stands as a symbol. Our second successful pass. KHRGG. Jane turned her head, the smile disappearing from her face as she looked to see who interrupted her, only to be met with Isaac writhing on the ground. Minen, it's gone, Zabi. How rude. Wayne. Isaac could feel it. The hunger hadn't felt this bad since the day he completed his scenario. The thing inside him. It was growing. Taking over. Isaac tried his best to formulate a thought. He wanted to summon his Vita flow, however, he was having difficulty. His skin darkened and the color in his eyes faded as his pupils dilated. When this didn't work, Isaac tried to reach for his bracelet in desperation. I refuse, I don't want to go. As the seconds passed, it felt like more of Isaac was disappearing. As he tried to reach for the bracelet, the towering figure standing over him caught his attention. Wayne stood with a great sword in his hand, staring at Isaac with cold eyes. What? Wayne raised his sword, without uttering a word. With his last bit of feeling, Isaac watched as the sword pierced his chest, going through his heart. He didn't even need to see it. Wayne turned the sword as Isaac spat blood. Is this it? This was the last straw. Isaac's consciousness was seconds from fading, and in those last seconds, he witnessed a screen before him. A thread has been completed. Caution! A disaster will occur. With it, Isaac closed his eyes. Chapter 57, Losing Control 2. Stay quiet till we leave. These were the last words Wayne whispered as he watched Isaac slump onto the ground. Removing his sword from the thing's chest, he couldn't help but notice the dark completion of his skin. Brilliant, Wayne. Just as ruthless as ever. Jane pressed her palms against her cheeks as she cheered. In truth, she didn't care whether the thing lived or died. He was less than insignificant to her. What she did care about was watching Wayne. The way he swings his sword, his power, his rage. Ah! Jane's face reddened. As Wayne turned his head, returning his great sword to his dimensional space, he walked back toward Jane. Now, as I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted. Jane snorted while glancing at Isaac's lifeless body. This is Merlin, of the 7 Deadly Sins verse. Or in other words, our second successful experiment. Wayne turned to the redhead. Successful. I know she isn't perfect yet, but give it time. She's just exited her scenario. This is a common occurrence. Additionally, she's arguably better than the experiment before her. You know just as well as I do that the closer the possession is to their original character's form, the higher their success. And look at her. Fully human and even has the same color as the true Merlin. Jane walked to Merlin, running her fingers through the young girl's hair. She's such a success that she is already referring to herself as Merlin. Although, her memories as the true Merlin seem to be lacking for now, and her current vessel is far too weak to handle the full brunt of Merlin's true abilities. But with time, she'll be perfect. With her strength at a stage 2 inheritor, or AC and rank, growing at a rapid rate, and her the effects of the geese working flawlessly, she'll soon reach my desired form. Jane turned back to Wayne as she clapped her hands and smiled brightly. And because I was responsible for her success, I got to keep her. Isn't that great? Wayne stared for a few seconds. It was almost impossible to tell what he was thinking. You? Keeping such a valuable asset? Wayne asked, a hint of skepticism in his voice. Well, it's not so unbelievable. I guess my brilliance has truly been acknowledged. I am a bishop, after all. Wayne paused, soon giving a simple nod as she turned to leave. Now, we've spent too much time here. We have big orders in the coming weeks. Jane let out a crazed grin. Finally. Let it begin. The attack on O. Before she could finish, the grin on Jane's face instantly disappeared as she slowly turned her head. With a serious expression, she paused as she witnessed the thing they'd just killed, standing perfectly straight and staring at her. Only, the thing was different. It wasn't just his darkened skin or dull and lifeless eyes, not even the shrunken pupils or the healed stab wound. No, instead what she found peculiar was the fact the thing seemed to eating his own arm. With his forearms to his mouth, the thing tore chunks of it, chewing and swallowing soon after. Meanwhile, Wayne, despite his usual scowl, didn't know what to make of the situation. Seeing the thing eat himself, heal and repeat, all 3 of them stared. Interesting. Merlin, do you still have him under your spell? Jane asked, intrigued by what she was seeing. No, Ms. Jane. With my current mana reserves, I can only use the spell once, and I have long since deactivated it upon seeing him die. Merlin answered in a respectful and obedient tone. Yes, I thought he'd died as well. I can't seem to sense any nin. Shoo. Jane didn't get to finish her words as she witnessed an almost tangible aura shoot from the thing, like steam escaping from a pot. What's this? It feels like nin, but it's so dense. I've never felt anything like it. Jane's playful behavior quickly disappeared as she glared at the thing. However, what surprised her was the aura escaping from the thing didn't seem to be stopped. It increased and kept growing, quickly creating an ominous dark presence around the thing. The power exuding off it cracked the ground below as one could see the terrors in the deep forest scatter one by one as the aura grew. The very air seemed to ripple as a powerful and cold feeling wrapped around the hearts of all those around, as if death itself was coiling its scythe around their hearts. Where regular Nan was usually white to the eye, the aura erupting from the thing was darker, almost pitch black as it contorted to form countless images. What? For the first time, Jane's demeanor changed to that of cautiousness as she stared with wide eyes, a drop of sweat pouring down the side of her face. She struggled to take a breath and she felt like she was underwater, her senses dulled. Merlin felt the same, as she took a step back, her face contorted into that of discomfort. Even Wayne, the stoic and stubborn large man, couldn't help but widen his eyes upon seeing the change in the thing. What are you waiting for? Cast an absolute cancel! Jane yelled, snapping at Merlin, bringing the girl out from her trance. I can't. My mana. I don't care. Use your life force if you have to. However, before Jane could finish, as if carried by the wind, the thing appeared between the two, grabbing Merlin by the throat and raising her in the air. Merlin watched the thing's face. A blank expression painted across his face, as if he had no brain activity. He simply stared with his shrunken, dull eyes, straight into Merlin's soul. As he did, one could see Merlin shriveling at a rapid rate, as if all the moisture was being sucked out from her. Raising her hand, Merlin spoke in a weak and raspy tone. Pact of mutual essence. As she cast a spell, her hand slowly dropped to her side, caressing the thing's neck as it went. To onlookers it seemed as though she failed in completing her spell as in a matter of seconds, she shriveled like a raisin, dropping to the ground as the thing released her. She's dead. Jane muttered. She had a hard time comprehending anything happening at the moment, as evidenced by her frozen expression and uneven breathing. What's happening? Is this perhaps Fia? Nonsense! Jane screamed at the top of her lungs as her veins bulged and fists tightened. Me? Afraid? You'll pay for these mind games. In any other case, Jane would be disappointed at Merlin's early death. However, an unrelenting rage clouded her judgment. She didn't care about anything else. Her pride was hurt. How could she feel fear? A woman of power. A bishop. A blood devil. I am the one who is feared. Name, Jane. Inherited character, blood devil, power. Verse, chainsaw man. Taking her claws and slashing her wrists, blood gushed out as one could see the liquid float, shaping and taking form. It wasn't long until a dozen long spears made of blood appeared, shooting at the thing at blurring speeds. As Jane grinned, her expression couldn't help but falter, seeing the thing stay in his same position, without flinching. Inevitably, the spears pierced the thing, trapping him as they pinned every limb onto the ground below. Be bastard! Jane mumbled upon seeing the thing fix his gaze on her, paying no attention to the spears. The blood around her wrists once again took form, this time forming a large hammer as she took the handle. Staying in her position, she swung the hammer, attempting to squash the thing under it. However, the solidified blood all around the thing started to quickly melt, losing its form and splashing onto the ground. This included the large hammer shooting toward him, as it simply liquefied, bathing him in a rain of blood. His aura, he did that with just his aura. Jane didn't know which was more terrifying, the thing's seemingly limitless power, or the fact he still hadn't broken eye contact with her, simply nibbling on his forearm. Bang bang bang! Jane's expression of discomfort quickly changed to form a forced smile as she looked to her side. This time, the thing seemed to notice something, as he too looked to his right. Stomping out from the forest was a colossal beast, stepping into the light and revealing itself. With red reptilian scales, a pair of giant wings, 4 feet and 3 massive heads, the beast stared at the thing as they both stayed unmoving. Have you forgotten? You aren't just fighting me. You're fighting all these failed possessions. Terror, Pyroar Barrows. Inherited character, Igneel. Verse, fairy tale. The thing turned his body to the Pyroar Barrows as all 3 of the dragon's heads pulled back, their throats then cheeks glowing red. Attack! Jane screamed in excitement. Boom! In the next second, all 3 dragon heads roared, a powerful wave of flames following and merging into one, completely engulfing the thing. The ground melted as the surrounding plant life turned to ash, the thing becoming completely engulfed in the flames and disappearing from sight. The attack could be seen from a bird's eye view as it burned through the forest like a laser, reaching for miles. Brilliant! Jane screamed like a mad scientist. However, she failed to pay attention. Inside the roar, the flames parted as something moved within it, drawing closer and closer to Pyroar Barrows. It seemed the dragon didn't notice either, as when the thing appeared before it, the flames came to an abrupt stop. With it, so did Jane's cackling. With his palm onto the middle head's nose, the thing appeared charred, his skin blackened to charcoal and hair burnt off. Yet at a rapid rate, the thing continued devouring its forearm, and in a matter of seconds, it was completely healed, its hair returning as usual, dark skin seeming as though it hadn't been affected. Although, the same couldn't be said for his clothes. As the thing pressed its palm onto the middle dragon's head, a familiar reaction to his touch played as the head started to shrivel quickly. Yet the thing didn't wait till it was done, as it dug its fingers into the head, pulling as the neck and muscle fibers started to tear. And soon, the head was removed along with a long spine, coiling beneath the thing's feet like a whip. However, there was something else. Something even Jane and the two remaining heads of the Pyroar Barrows couldn't help but notice among their fear and disbelief. The thing's aura had started to change. Although it was still dark and ominous, and still growing in power as the seconds passed, now it was becoming hotter. The tangible aura kept his cold feeling that made one shudder inside, yet was making Jane sweat and grow red on the outside. It wasn't long until the aura became as hot as the roar the Pyroar Barrows had just let out, hotter even. The Pyroar Barrows tried to flap its wings to escape, its primal survival instincts yelling at it to run, but the thing held onto the stump of its missing head. The dragon's prideful and powerful roars were quickly reduced to shrieks of a scared parrot. Meanwhile, Jane took a step back, shivering as her heartbeat quickened. What's happening? What is that thing? The zombie disease. In the world of Hunter x Hunter, those cursed by this disease became a mindless zombie, if they could survive. They were reduced to a creature, left to feed off itself till the end of time. However, with their mutation that caused their aura nodes to expand far past what any human or creature in the world could achieve, they became something more. So much so that their bodies now attracted the Nen in the atmosphere, allowing them to utilize a vast and infinite pool of Nen, making them a formidable opponent. However, that was in the world of Hunter x Hunter. The same couldn't be said for Isaac. Upon Isaac using his Nen to constantly suppress the thing inside him, the zombie disease adapted, forming a new mutation. You have unlocked a perk. Feed. You can feed on the power and PS of others, adding it to your own, zombie. A mutation that truly came into fruition at this moment. Boom! The aura of the thing exploded toward the Pyroar Barrows, swallowing it whole with its black flames, and in an instant, the Pyroar Barrows turned into ash. Where the thing would usually feed on itself, this new taste of Nen and now flame magic was addicting. As it felt this urge, it turned to the only other person in the area. Upon seeing the thing's gaze, Jane stepped back. This wasn't how it was meant to be. No, 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 no. Jane fell into a panic as she pulled her hair, pulling out strands. In a form of desperation, Jane swung her arm, a giant blood spear shooting toward the thing like a bullet. However, rather than standing still this time, the thing raised its arm, groaning as a dark glow erupted from its palm. As it did, the blood spear corroded, turning into dust. It can't be, tea-time magic, Merlin. Jane muttered. However, this spear was simply a distraction, as she didn't let this stop her. Summoned a glass flask containing a red liquid, then popped the cap, quickly chugging the contents and swallowing. As she did, it wasn't long until she morphed into something horrible. In an instant, she appeared as a tall humanoid with 4 arms and a mostly pale-skinned body. Her head had a pointed appearance with a red color, sharp teeth, and 2 circular eyes with cross-like pupils. She also had long horns and longer hair than before. Her chest was an open rib cage showing a chest cavity full of intestines up to her neck. Skreek. Breathing in, the blood devil let out a blood-curdling scream as it echoed throughout the red zone. Simultaneously, countless eyes glowed from whatever was left of the forest, countless terrors stepping out, with the thing standing between it all. Meanwhile, Wayne stared at this all while leaning on a faraway tree, his arms crossed. Zombie boy, how will you survive this? Chapter 58, Losing Control 3. We came as soon as we could. In a large forest, a long fence with countless caution signs separated Ravenwood and Spawn. A singular shed lay before the fence, seeming as though they were touching as countless suited individuals could be seen standing outside it. Thank you. I'm sorry to have disturbed you, Mr. Adams, however, I didn't have any other choice. A familiar old man in a janitor's suit held a tablet as he stood before a small team of men wearing black suits. The old man glanced at each individual before him, his glance hanging on the individual named Adams for the longest. And who better to deal with something like this than the 2nd Division captain of the Hearts Guild? A particular tall, blonde-haired man with a ponytail and cigarette in his mouth, an unfriendly scowl painted across his face, stood before them all. Well, with a case this severe, I don't blame you. How is it looking? Adams asked in a hoarse voice, puffing smoke as he did. With a nod, the old man turned the tablet he held, showing a map of Ravenwood. However, Adams was able to notice the red dots that grew in size in each location. How is that possible? Adams asked, furrowing his eyebrows as he glared at the screen. I'm still working on it myself. Compared to what it is now, it started as quite the tame incident, a simple terror from the yellow zone trespassing into the green zone. The old man spoke, tracing his fingers across the screen as he showed the green zone. However, a spontaneous eruption of energy occurred in the same area. Like it had just appeared from thin air. As the old man said these last words, he changed the position of his finger, until it paused on the red zone. The energy from the green zone then disappeared. For some time, I wasn't able to locate where it had disappeared to, however, not too long ago, a different energy signature erupted from within the red zone. Adam stared at the red dot, bigger and darker in color than any other on the screen. That, I've never seen an indicator that severe. Adams commented, to which the old man nodded in agreement. Neither have I. It seems upon this sudden power spike, countless others appeared, although, not nearly as strong. At this moment, I've come to 2 conclusions. The first is the terror in the red zone have engaged in some sort of war. The reason behind this is unclear. The old man paused as Adams looked up, meeting his line of sight. And the second. Something far more terrifying has appeared in Ravenwood, and even the terrors are fighting for dear survival. Silence enveloped the area as Adams stood up straight, puffing smoke into the air. Interesting. Dear survival, hey? I'm wondering if an A and rank like myself will be good enough. Tossing his cigarette on the ground and stomping on it, Adams glanced behind him. The SA should already be aware of what's happening here. Hell, they're probably on their way. Let's get this over with before they can steal our thunder, hey? Adams passed the old man as his team followed from behind, his low and rough voice making his words seem authoritative. Look sharp, boys. We got our work cut out for us. Boom. Crackle. What was once a lush and vibrant forest, now lay in ruins as countless trees were sticking out from the ground and destroyed, bushes and plant life were burnt to a crisp and the landscape changed. In the middle of it all, a small boy could be seen, blitzing around the battlefield. It was hard to tell if it was speed or simple teleportation, however, his figure continued to blur as he ignored the countless corpses. Countless creatures lay on the ground, some burnt to a crisp, some with countless punctured holes and some simply unmoving, as if their soul had left their body. Currently, the thing held a small creature that resembled a boy with horns and long blonde hair. Not too far from the two was Jane, in her devil form as she hid behind a few terrors. He's killed every single terror that has come at him. It had been hours, at least, Jane thought so. Yet, they still weren't able to tire him out, much less hurt him. Jane stared. Despite her being a literal devil and standing before an army of terrors, she was starting to wonder who the real monster here was. As she thought this, she witnessed another terror's leap at the thing. Turning its head, the thing simply nibbled on its arm, watching as the terror approached him. Terrors, son of the devil. Inherited characters, Yukio Okumura. Verse, Blue Exorcist. A skeleton figure with glasses, or maybe simple lenses over his eye sockets, with a wave of blue flames erupting from it. Shine. These flames were far greater than that of the thing as evidenced by the thing's skin started to slowly melt, as he started to resemble a melting mannequin. However, as the thing reached out for the terror, the skeleton disappeared. It wasn't stupid. It had seen everything that had happened to its comrades. Therefore, it disappeared from its position, reappearing behind the thing. Although the thing far exceeded the skeleton in speed, it stayed unmoving. Instead, its hand presented a dark glow. Simultaneously, the skeleton somehow reappeared before him, as if he was on rewind. Shuyu. Once again, the thing's hand glowed and this time, the blue flames disappeared from the skeleton, leaving him powerless, allowing the thing to easily grab its skull, the skeleton's bones quickly being reduced to ash. As this happened, hints of blue specks could be seen dancing amongst the thing's massive aura, its previous heat increasing tenfold. Nothing is working. Jane screamed. As it stood, she and the 3 terrors before her were all that were left of the red zone, excluding the terrors who fled into what remained of the forest. It seems the thing noticed this too, as it set its eyes on Jane, its gaze never faltering. As it did, Jane felt her heart drop. Attack him! As the 3 terrors kicked off the ground as Jane screamed, it was futile. The thing had already raised its hand, a dark aura emanating from it as the seconds passed. Shoo! In the next second, a ball of energy appeared before the thing's hand. Meanwhile, Jane bit her lip. The energy! The feeling! She knew it well, but never had she seen it as strong as this. She could only gawk at the fact that thing could release this technique to such caliber after just copying it. Spirit wave! Jane didn't bother calling back her minions. Instead, countless layers of blood were stacked before her, acting as an impenetrable wall. On the other side of the wall, the terrors neared the thing. However, it was too late. Boom! The energy exploded from the thing's palm as the laser of an attack tore through the forest, reaching for miles as it destroyed the landscape, much less the terrors, which instantly turned to dust. As the beam of energy started to shrink, soon disappearing, chaos was left in its wake as the ground changed form due to the power of the attack, resembling lava. Amongst this all, Jane lay on the ground, the lower right half of her body completely obliterated. She groaned, unable to comment on the situation anything further, only her mind going over and over the events, trying to figure out when everything changed for the worse. That boy, it all started with that boy. No, that is no boy. Jane looked up, the thing standing over her as it groaned. She hadn't realized when it had come so close. You're a monster. Jane's comment fell onto deaf ears, as the thing prepared to reach out for her. Zombie boy. The thing paused as a rock was smashed over its head. Behind it, a large and muscular man with a simple t-shirt, jet black hair and a large great sword in his hand stood. However, contrary to the man's usual scowl, he now presented a more neutral expression as he stared at the thing. Wayne. Jane muttered, seeing a familiar face. Yes, Wayne. Save me. Execute this monster. Jane pleaded as if she were a damsel in distress. Wayne stayed silent as the thing turned its head, facing Wayne as it ingested a chunk of its forearm. No words were spoken, as the two stared at each other. The breeze that previously couldn't be felt due to the dense and countless trees and plant life, now caused the thing's messy hair to dance on its forehead. After a few seconds, Wayne took a step forward, walking toward the thing. The thing stayed still as Wayne's footsteps gradually grew quicker. It wasn't long until Wayne was leaping toward the thing, taking long strides like a gazelle as he carried his sword, quickly coming face to face with the thing. The thing simply raised its arm, ready to grab on. And it did. Wayne thrusted his great sword into the heart of the thing, as his head also entered the thing's grasp. As usual, it wouldn't be long until Wayne was reduced to a pile of ash. However, as the seconds passed, nothing happened. Silence. Even the breeze had halted as if the world itself stopped time in anticipation. For those who listened carefully, a single gulp could be heard. Jane watched, so sure that Wayne was done for as she tried to make a run for it, using this as a distraction. However, she could not help but pause and stare. As this happened, Wayne was the first to move, removing his hand from the thing's mouth. Simultaneously, the boy's darkened face started to show hints of color. Slowly, the darkness was being reduced, the amber returning to his eyes and the immense aura surrounding him severely lessening. It was because of this that the boy dropped to the ground, unmoving as if he were dead. Crouching, Wayne sneakily placed a familiar bracelet belonging to the boy under his body, hiding it. As he did, he was distracted by low cackling as he turned his head back. Brilliant, brilliant, Wayne! Jane erupted in applause, but seeing as she found it challenging in her devil form, she resorted to verbal cheers. I knew it. I knew you had something special about you. The question of how or what Wayne had just done seemed irrelevant to Jane, as she bathed in the wave of emotions she was feeling. Relief, joy, and most notably, vengeance. Step aside, Wayne. I'll make this little brat. There's no need. Wayne stood between the boy and Jane, as the devil couldn't help but be taken aback by Wayne's sudden interference. She'd built the idea of Wayne being a submissive and obedient pet. It was why she felt pleasure in ordering him to do things. No matter what she said, he'd do. However, a thought occurred to her. Remembering how Wayne had spent all that time with the boy, and how it looked as though he was fiddling with his corpse, this was only a partial reason for why Jane had come to her conclusion. The biggest reason for her assumption came from remembering who Wayne was. Who his character was. "Step aside, Wayne. How dare you!" Bang! Before Jane could finish, Wayne raised his greatsword, swinging it downward as it smashed into the ground, creating a small crater. Additionally, a shower of blood sprayed on Wayne as Jane's head lay severed in two, hanging off her neck. Yet, despite this injury, she still seemed to be alive. Leaping back, Jane's head started to slowly heal as she cackled. "I knew it. I'll admit, you had me fooled. But there was a part of me who always knew you didn't have it in you, traitor." Jane screamed. A hint of rage and mostly excitement oozed from her words. However, Wayne stayed silent. Scree! Jane let out a blood-curdling screech, and simultaneously, a few eyes peered from what was left of the red zone. It seemed the sudden disappearance of the deathly aura gave the terrors some peace of mind. Meanwhile, Wayne's dimensional space, in the form of a ring, hummed as in an instant, Wayne's body was encased in what seemed to be armor. However, it was far more than that. It was a sleek black armor with a dark cloak behind it, its mask covering Wayne's entire skull, only leaving a small crevice where the eyes were as two red dots glowed from within it. "Control your emotions, my foot. Don't pretend like the only reason you are who you are isn't because of the power that comes from your unyielding rage." The terrors drew closer as Wayne raised his greatsword. "You are simply a man among gods, but still a man. So come at me, Way, no." Jane's eyes threatened to pop out from her skull to the intensity she spoke with, however, she didn't care. Her fear from a few minutes ago had disappeared, replaced with crazed excitement. "Show me what a human is capable of, Black Swordsman." Name, Wayne. Inherited character, Guts. Verse, Berserk. Chapter 59, Aftermath 1. Darkness. That was all Isaac could comprehend in the space he was in. Endless darkness. He was conscious, his eyelids barely open, yet he felt as though his mind was clouded. He couldn't formulate a thought. His body was free, floating in the darkness, yet his limbs felt as though they rejected every single one of his thoughts. He couldn't move. His senses, touch, sight, smell, and sound all eluded him, the only sense of movement he could manage was his breath. He was no better than a vegetable. He didn't know when he had arrived here, or how long he'd been floating in this darkness, but despite his clouded thoughts, one thing was clear. The absence of something that had been a nuisance to him for some time. He wasn't hungry. The churning feeling that felt like his guts were turning, or the constant craving for his own skin when his hunger grew, was gone. Wait a minute, I can feel. Isaac mumbled slowly in his mind. He'd realized his feeling was somewhat retuning. I can think. He'd realized the fog in his mind was lessening. Light. He'd realized his sight was returning as a blinding light appeared in the distance. Slowly but surely, Isaac was returning to himself, and it was because of this he was able to notice the shadowy silhouette standing between him and the light. The two stood opposite each other. The silhouette formed an outline that was eerily similar to Isaac's height and frame. Though Isaac was still not fully conscious, he didn't need to be to recognize the figure before him. Despite never seeing it, never meeting it before or hearing anything about a shadowy figure standing before a light, there was something else that stood out to Isaac. The feeling. The feeling he got from the figure before him. The dark, empty, and devouring feeling. Thing. As Isaac thought this, the light grew exponentially, as he squinted his eyes, the void of darkness disappearing by the second, and with it, so did Isaac. A boy with amber eyes flickered his eyes open as he woke to the dirt pressing against the corner of his mouth. The bitter and foul taste tainted his taste buds as he slowly got up from the ground. Where am I? As Isaac took a seat on the dirt, he paused, noticing his bracelet was under his sleeping body, and most notably, why the hell am I naked? Isaac yelled inwardly, quickly dashing to his dimensional space and summoning some clothes. As he forced himself into some pants, his eyes couldn't help but catch the scene he was in. Upon looking around, Isaac's eyes were left widened as he froze. What the hell happened here? Isaac currently stood in a space devoid of any tree or plant life, the landscape around him a mess and the dirt warm for some reason. However, that wasn't what made Isaac shudder. No, it was the demon-like being with crossed pupils, completely severed in half, lying a few meters away from him. Additionally, countless other creatures lay sliced in half or decapitated. The small area was littered with monsters from hell, all dead. In the next second, Isaac kicked off the ground, dashing toward the forest for some cover. Being out in the open was less than ideal. However, before he paused, staring at the demon-like creature that stood out from the rest. With its cross-eyed pupils, Isaac recognized it. This is that lady. Tracing her body over, Isaac was also able to notice the ring on one of her 4 fingers. Serves you right. Isaac's mind was still foggy, however, he felt a small rage upon seeing her. He didn't know why, but his feelings for her were enough. Robbery. Isaac sang inwardly. Without thinking, he snatched the ring from her finger, quickly summoning it into his space as he dashed for the forest. Upon re-entering the dense forest, Isaac swung a cloak around himself, entering Zetsu and hiding the dense plant life. Think. What happened? What's the last thing you remember? Isaac closed his eyes, breathing rhythmically as he calmed himself. Soon, the events before his unconsciousness flooded into his mind. Wayne. He killed me. At least, that's what Isaac thought. However, upon pondering for a second, he couldn't help but rethink it. The last thing he remembered was Wayne thrusting his great sword into his chest, whispering the words, "Stay hidden." Something along those lines. Was he trying to pretend like he killed me, knowing I'd heal? Well, that worked out great, didn't it? Isaac commented sarcastically. Upon thinking this, he looked back to the area that looked as though a meteor had dropped. You're telling me, the zombie, the thing did all that? Isaac didn't know whether to be frightened something like that was inside him, or to be glad those terrors and Jane got what they deserved. Things worked out this time, but if I lose control in Spawn or Aurelius? Isaac shook his head. He'd rather not think about it. After all this, Isaac had one more question: how did he awake once again? Did the zombie taking over have a time limit? No, he doubted that. After all, it wouldn't explain the handful of Vita Flow pills missing from his dimensional space. He needn't check, seeing as the magic that made the dimensional space came with a feature that allowed you to know everything inside. If I had to guess, the thing swallowed the Vita Flow, and because it wouldn't purposefully use the Nen to suppress itself as I do, I guess that my body naturally acted on its own, leading the Nen to the hunger in my abdomen. Like breathing, this act had become natural to Isaac. Leading the river of Nen entering his body, straight to his abdomen was now second nature. After all, if it wasn't, he wouldn't be able to do it in his sleep or when unfocused. So who fed it to me? The thing certainly didn't. Was it perhaps him? Wayne. Isaac knew nothing about the mysterious man who he'd met in the forest. He'd saved Isaac from death, yet put him at death's door all within the span of 24 hours. And potentially, he was the one to save him again. Who are you? And whose side are you on? Isaac had questions, but they would have to wait. At the moment, he was still stuck in the red zone with no way out. And although a good number of the terrors in this zone were now dead, Isaac could feel the presence of a fair amount still lingering. Stomp. Most notably, a tall and thick figure with deformed skin, no clothes and no eyes, only carrying a sword that looked as though it was a cane. Name: Blind Boogeyman. Inherited character: Fujitora. Verse: One Piece. This is a terror of the red zone. These are what the thing was dropping like flies. Simply being in the presence of the terror had Isaac sweating. Without a doubt, Isaac knew. If that creature were to notice him despite his Zetsu, he wouldn't stand a chance. Calm down. Panicking wouldn't get him anywhere, and he knew this. Think, how can you escape? Isaac ran countless scenarios in his head, but nothing worked. He couldn't make a run for it, as the blind boogeyman and countless other terrors would instantly notice him. He couldn't activate his scarlet eyes at the moment, therefore he couldn't rely on the boost in Nen and speed. Isaac sighed. There is one way. The technique Isaac had been learning. The same one he'd witnessed Zig perform. The same one he needed to call himself an assassin. He needed to master it now. He needed to truly become invisible. Not just with Zetsu. Everything about him. To sight, to smell, to sound, even to touch. Everything. He needed to disappear. Isaac's heartbeat quickened. He was nervous. It's do or die. My brains won't help me now, so I need to be stupid. Isaac breathed rhythmically. In the next few seconds, he would either die or buy himself enough time to survive. Zaldic genes. If Zig can do it, so can I. Isaac rose to his feet, still staying hidden so as not to alert anything around him. Come on, Isaac. Grow some balls. Dark Continent, Silver, Zabi. Ravenwood, who? You've survived far worse. Isaac breathed in. Come on. And so, closing his eyes, Isaac took his first step. The red zone. Isaac knew where he was going. He'd memorized the map from the guild. As he walked, Isaac shut off his brain, focusing completely on his body. He controlled his feet. The second it touched the ground, he placed his foot in the most optimal position so as not to produce any noise. His footsteps were completely quiet. The only thing that could be heard in the atmosphere was his heartbeat and the breeze whooshing as they came in contact with the trees. Isaac breathed, and with it, his heartbeat slowed, until it was practically paused. The breeze brushed against him as they passed the trees, making contact with him. He noticed the interaction he had with the wind stood out too much, so, he controlled his body so the wind made contact with him the same way it did the tree. He became a tree. The yellow zone. It still wasn't perfect. He exuded too much heat, it was noticeable. With his paused heart, he slowed his blood flow as his skin turned pale, causing him to become colder. He no longer seemed like a living being. Additionally, his cold skin prevented him from sweating. He was odorless. The trees started to lessen, and the plant life became less dense. He could no longer be a tree. Therefore, he focused on the wind itself. The frantic and erratic wind. Unpredictable. Isaac controlled his body, making it more streamlined as he quickened his steps. Simultaneously, a small barrier of air was created before him. He'd entered a slipstream. He hid behind this barrier of air that imitated the wind. He was faster. He was disappearing. He'd become the wind. The green zone. A blurred figure moved at incredible speeds, despite simply walking. Although not at speeds that were comparable to monsters in Spawn and Ravenwood, 50 km/h for walking was impressive. Additionally, this figure wasn't blurred due to his speed. No, instead it was the distortion of air around him. Although, if one looked closely, they'd be able to notice the blur in the air. However, without paying attention, it was impossible. Not to mention this figure didn't make a sound as it went. Like a breeze, there was a minor whistle. No heat, no smell, almost no sound, virtually no appearance and no life. It was nothing more than the wind. Or perhaps a ghost. As the seconds passed, this figure started to slow, the distortion around it lessening, only to reveal a boy with a cloak and pale face with closed eyes. I did it. Isaac thought, his skin returning to normal. He was so in the zone, he hadn't realized the sun had started to set and he had already made it back to the green zone. Additionally, Isaac knew what he had just accomplished was great. After all, he had the screen before him to prove it. Congratulations, you have created an art. Ghost's Passage, progressible. Although Isaac knew the contents of the screen without opening his eyes, he did anyway to bask in his rewards. However, as he did, he noticed a team of black-suited individuals before him, all staring at him as he stared back. Among the black-suited individuals, one stood before the rest, staring at Isaac with wide and surprised eyes. "Who the hell are you?" muttered Adams, a thick and powerful aura exuding from him upon seeing Isaac. Meanwhile, Isaac couldn't help but think he'd messed up. Crap. Chapter 60, Aftermath 2. Where the hell did he come from? This was the question that repeated inside the minds of everyone present at the moment the mysterious cloaked figure appeared from the woods. They had been preparing to venture out into the red zone, but before they could even make it past the green, they were forced to a stop upon seeing the figure. "Hey, I asked you a question," Adams repeated himself. He was prepared to attack at any moment. Despite being the strongest member of the team and far more experienced, even he could sense the figure approaching them. It's like he came with the wind, suddenly appearing behind them. "I'm a member of the Hearts Guild. I came here to complete a mission." The figure answered in a neutral tone, brandishing his ID. The figure spoke as though he were unaffected by the pressure coming off Adams, which the blonde-haired man noticed. Despite the figure presenting ID, Adams was still suspicious. This was because the ID depicted AD and rank. Bullshit. I would have noticed AD and rank sneak up on me. Adams started to second-guess himself. Perhaps he simply wasn't paying attention and it was a fluke. So then why did his team also have the same reaction? Something was off. Wait. A familiar old man in a janitor's suit rushed toward the team and the cloaked figure, standing between the two parties. He's telling the truth. I bid him farewell myself. The old man defended the figure, to which Adams paused for a second. Is that so? In that case, what can you tell me about what's going on inside? Before Adams could finish, he was interrupted as all eyes turned to the speaking voice. Ivor Adams. How long has it been? Are you still a sour old grape? A female with autumn curly hair reaching to her shoulders, quite the stylish attire, sunglasses and quite the short frame spoke in a high-pitched voice as Adams soon scowled deeply. Monroe Cooper. I'm not surprised the SA sent you to snoop around. Adams responded, to which the female named Monroe smirked. Snoop? Have you forgotten we are the ones who allowed you to profit off Ravenwood? I have a right to be here if something has occurred, arguably more so than you do. This was true. The Hearts Guild wouldn't exist if the SA hadn't allowed them access to Ravenwood. Although every important individual knew the SA only allowed this so they would lose less resources on Ravenwood, using the Hearts Guild to accomplish it instead. However, a certain cloaked figure knew when it came to Ravenwood, everything was a mystery. No way the SA doesn't take this chance to figure out as much as possible. This is probably the first time something like this has happened. Isaac watched as the two individuals stared each other down. Go ahead. I can't stop you, of course. Adams waved off, walking away from the green zone, back to spawn. Where are you going? Monroe raised an eyebrow. Why is that your concern? Boys, investigate what happened in the red zone and report back to me, as we planned. Adams spoke, instructing his team, then turning his gaze to Isaac. You, come with me. Adams pointed, walking away as Isaac and the old man soon followed, confused. Although, after a few seconds, a devious grin could be seen painted across Isaac's face as an idea crossed his mind. Meanwhile, Monroe stared for a few seconds, shrugging in the next as she walked toward the red zone. Who was that? Isaac sat before Adams in the small shed belonging to the old man, opposite each other on each side of the table. Isaac had put on a spare mask he had, identical to his original. Therefore, he no longer needed to lower his gaze to his amber eyes. It was only the two of them, and as Adams looked through Isaac's card, he replied. Monroe Cooper. A high-ranking and esteemed member of the SA and 32nd ranked amongst inheritors in the spawn. Adams replied nonchalantly. Meanwhile, Isaac couldn't help but blink. 32nd. How strong would that be? So, Zal, why don't we start with why you were in the green zone? Adams asked, lighting a cigarette as he did. Isaac, his back straight and body language seeming unthreatened, answered shortly after. I was out on a mission, Isaac answered, placing the mission request slip he'd taken from the guild on the table. Adams traced his eyes over the sheet of paper, nodding as he confirmed this part of the story. And were you successful in your mission? Isaac nodded as a small hum could be heard. Yes. Thud. As Isaac answered, a large carcass appeared on the ground with a small thud. A terror possessed with the character Todo Aoi of the Jujutsu Kaisen verse. It. You killed that? Isaac was interrupted but didn't pay any attention to it as he answered the question, watching Adam stare at the carcass. Yes. It says here you needed to kill a terror residing in the green zone. This terror belongs to the yellow zone at the very least. Isaac blinked. Yellow zone. No wonder it was so hard to kill. Isaac cursed inwardly, yet despite his surprise, didn't show it outwardly. I was unaware, Isaac answered simply as Adam switched his gaze from the carcass to Isaac, glaring at him. Here's what I think. The small number of guildsmen in Ravenwood at the time were swiftly evacuated during the incident. Yet you happened to disappear, reappearing suddenly when the incident had died down. Isaac stayed unmoving as he showed no emotions, staying quiet. I do not think you are telling me everything, I do not think you killed that terror by chance and I do not think you are AD and rank. Adams puffed smoke as his voice lowered and intensified with each sentence. After a few seconds, Isaac spoke. You didn't let me finish. Adams raised an eyebrow. But you're correct. There's more to the story. With a pause, a hum could be heard coming from Adam's ring as a spherical globe appeared on the table between the two. This is an artifact which detects lies. If you're dishonest, it'll glow. Artifact, Forged Globe of Truth, deranked. That'll be troublesome. But no problem. After all, the best lies are the true ones. Isaac made sure his expression and demeanor remained stoic. At the moment, he was in control of the conversation. He needed it to stay that way. Upon slaying this terror, as a last-ditch effort, it teleported us to the red zone. Adams narrowed his gaze, noticing the globe hadn't glowed. The red zone? He asked, to which Isaac nodded. That must have been the powerful energy that was recorded at the green zone. Adams thought inwardly. That's correct. It was there I witnessed two individuals. They were neither SA nor guildsmen. A male and female. I don't know who they were, or what they planned to do. The globe didn't glow, therefore, Adams did not interrupt. However, they were responsible for awakening a dormant monster, one which tore through the red zone and the terrors within. Monster? Was it a terror? Adams asked, confused by Isaac's vague words. If I'm being honest, I don't know what it was. Isaac wasn't lying, as proven by the globe. Before today, the globe would have glowed if he'd said the same sentence. However, after today, Isaac's idea of what the zombie was had become somewhat contorted. It was a calamity, yes. But that didn't answer what the zombie was at its core. Was it a disease? Or perhaps, a living entity? Like the shadowy silhouette. In an hour or two, your men will report back to you, reporting the destruction that the monster had caused. And remained of one of the two individuals I mentioned, the female. Adam stayed quiet, soon moving his lips. And where were you during all this? Isaac paused. I was there, in the middle of the chaos. I tried to make sense of my situation, but my senses were overwhelmed. Isaac answered vaguely once again. Using these vague words, he could trick both the lie detector and Adams. At first, he'd hoped Adams would jump to conclusions and fill in the blanks himself with assumptions. However, he doubted the man before him was so careless. And what of the monster? What happened to it? Adams puffed smoke, his gaze never leaving Isaac. I made it disappear. Adams glanced at the globe, realizing it didn't glow. And how did you do that? That's a secret. In reality, Isaac's lie was enough for him to be cleared of all suspicion. To which he was. However, this wasn't enough for what he had planned. He had to make Adams crave more. He needed to pretend there was a whole piece of the puzzle that was missing, and only he could complete it. Which is partially true anyway. Excuse me. Adams' glare intensified. It's a secret. I've proven already I am on the side of the Hearts Guild. Yet I was put in danger and almost died because of the guild's incompetence. This would have never happened if you'd realized you had intruders in the red zone, and you'd dealt with this terror before it trespassed into the green. Adams puffed smoke, glaring at Isaac. And? That's the gig. Stuff happens, and the day doesn't always go as planned. You're alive, some people don't even get that much. Adams retorted in a somewhat annoyed tone. You're right. Isaac replied in a neutral tone as Adams stared silently. In truth, Isaac knew this. However, his point still stood. I'll be damned if I let them walk away without some sort of justice. Isaac called it justice, however, in reality. But wouldn't the SA love to find out about everything I have to say? The intruders, the monster, and the secret. Isaac was a petty crook, down to the bone. Adams paused. Are you blackmailing me? No. I'm blackmailing the Hearts Guild. More like scamming. After all, there is no secret I'm hiding from you. At least, none that I'm willing to tell the SA. Ahoy! And does this secret have something to do with that mark on your neck? Adams pointed, to which Isaac was taken aback. Mark? What mark? Though confused, he remained casual. No. He answered, continuing shortly after. Monroe Cooper shouldn't be far away. All it would take is 10 minutes to find her and explain what I know. The Hearts Guild will become a laughing stock, losing its title as the #1 guild, and not long after, their access to Ravenwood. You'll be destroyed. Despite Isaac's threats, Adam's expression remained the same as he constantly puffed smoke, the shed being filled with the smell of nicotine. You've got balls, I'll give you that, brat. This is the first time I've seen someone challenge us so casually. Adams put out his cigarette. Fine. You got a deal. But I have some demands of my own. After all, I haven't ignored the witty answers you've been giving me. Isaac wasn't so quick to reject Adam's words. He decided to hear him out. Firstly, you'll only be allowed to choose a single item from the guild's exclusive market, only accessible to VIPs. Before Isaac could say anything, Adam continued. Secondly, you'll have to sign a contract stating you'll never leak any of the events that occurred today in an attempt to harm the guild. Isaac didn't mind this second demand. He'd expected something like this. Besides, he said, in an attempt to harm them, I can still speak of the events to those I deem trustworthy and can keep a secret. Like Oliver, never mind. Isaac quickly rejected that idea. It would be better to keep it a secret. What else? Adams raised 3 fingers. Lastly, I want you to join my division in the guild. Isaac raised an eyebrow. After pulling something like this, he was fully prepared to leave the guild. Therefore, this third demand shocked him. Divisions. In total, the Hearts Guild had 3. Each was assigned specific roles. For example, one of the jobs of the second division was to oversee Ravenwood. Meaning if Isaac were to join, he could have free access to Ravenwood whenever he wanted. Although, it'd be a while till he came back. No wonder he was so nonchalant at my blackmail. He wants me to join. Although, I have no intention of doing so. Can I take some time to think about the third demand? Isaac asked, to which Adams nodded. You have until I get the contract ready. In the meantime, you can search for your reward. Adams stood, handing Isaac his watch which displayed the VIP market of the Hearts Guild. Isaac nodded as Adams left the room. Now, let's see what they have to offer. It had been about 30 minutes since Adams had left the shed and Isaac began his search for his reward. Currently, Isaac could be seen with wide eyes and a gaping jaw, staring at the screen before him. This is perfect for me. Simultaneously, the door opened as Adams walked in and Isaac tried his best to regain his composure. Without waiting for the man to talk, Isaac turned the holographic screen to Adams. This. I want this. Adams stared, soon raising an eyebrow. An art? This one? Are you sure? There's a reason we still have this in stock. The requirements are strenuous. Isaac paid no attention to the man's warning. He already knew after reading the description, and he'd already made his choice. Yes. I'm positive. Adam soon sighed, staring at the red dragon on the screen. Art, 8 inner gates.
Thanks for listening.